The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. For 1,000 generations, the Jedi have served as its guardians, interpreting its will and maintaining balance. But what happens when something arrives from beyond the Force's reach? Something guided not by mystical energy, but by an unshakable moral compass, forged in another reality entirely. What happens when a soldier who never surrenders meets a hero on the brink of his greatest fall? The sky above Coruscant's Senate District tore open with a sound like reality screaming. No hyperspace signature preceded it. No ship appeared on any scanner from the planetary defense grid to the Jedi Temple's own sensors. One moment, the endless traffic streams of the galactic capital flowed in their orderly chaos. The next, a wound opened in the fabric of space itself. A burning blue rift that spat out a single figure wreathed in cosmic energy, before collapsing with a thunderclap that shattered windows for 3 kilometers. Steve Rogers had approximately 2 seconds to register that he was no longer in the Hydra facility, no longer fighting to contain the Tesseract's unstable energy, before gravity reminded him that he was 5,000 meters above an alien cityscape. The wind tore at him as he fell, the vibranium shield still strapped to his arm, his tactical suit scorched from Tesseract energy. Below him, towers of impossible height stretched toward the sky, their surfaces crawling with speeders and transport craft. The sunset painted everything in shades of amber and crimson, or were those 2 suns setting? His enhanced vision caught details even in freefall, strange ship designs, alien architecture, holographic advertisements in languages he'd never seen. Not Earth. Definitely not Earth. Steve twisted in the air, angling toward a landing platform jutting from one of the towers. His enhanced physiology would let him survive the impact, but survival and walking away were 2 different things. He pulled the shield from his back, holding it beneath him, to absorb the worst of... The fall stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Steve hung suspended 50 meters above the platform, an invisible force cradling him like a giant hand. His tactical training screamed trap, but he had no leverage, no way to fight something he couldn't see or touch. The presence lowered him slowly, almost gently, until his boots touched metal. The moment the force released him, Steve dropped into a defensive crouch, shield raised. The platform was empty except for a single figure standing near the edge, silhouetted against the setting suns. No. The figure was walking toward him now, moving with the careful grace of someone prepared for violence but hoping to avoid it. Easy, the man said, hands raised and open. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with shoulder-length hair and a scar cutting across his right eye. He wore layered robes in earth tones, and a cylindrical object hung from his belt. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Knight. I felt... something impossible just happened. Something ripped through the Force itself. Steve slowly straightened but kept his shield ready. Jedi. Knight. The terms meant nothing to him. But the man's body language spoke of military training and combat experience. Captain Steve Rogers, United States Army. The words came automatically, even though he suspected the United States meant nothing here. Where am I? Coruscant, capital of the Galactic Republic. Anakin's eyes narrowed, studying Steve with unnerving intensity. You're not from any system I know, that armor, that shield, and I can't sense you in the Force. It's like you're not even there. Like you're a hole in the fabric of reality. I don't know what the Force is, Steve said carefully. Last thing I remember, I was trying to stop a weapon called the Tesseract from destroying my world. Then everything went blue, and I was falling through your sky. Anakin's hand drifted toward the cylinder at his belt. A weapon, Steve's instincts told him. But not in threat. More like a nervous habit. The Force is the energy field that connects all living things. Every Jedi can sense it, manipulate it. Except I can't sense you at all. You're like a blank spot where a person should be. He paused, and something complicated crossed his face. The Council will want to question you. They're going to think you're a separatist weapon. Separatist? We're at war. The Separatists want to break away from the Republic. It's complicated. Anakin glanced toward the skyline, where Republic cruisers hung in the atmosphere like floating cities. Look, I don't know how you got here, but appearing out of nowhere in the middle of Coruscant during wartime, that's going to raise questions. Dangerous questions. Steve studied the young man before him. Beneath the Jedi's calm exterior, he saw something achingly familiar. The weight of too much responsibility, the exhaustion of fighting a war with no end in sight, and something else. Something darker. The same haunted look he'd seen in soldiers' eyes during the war. Men pushed too far, asked to sacrifice too much. Will these council people listen to reason? Steve asked. Anakin's laugh was bitter. Sometimes, when it suits them. He caught himself, and his expression smoothed into something more neutral. Sorry. It's been a long war. Come on. We should get you somewhere secure before someone reports a mysterious armored soldier appearing in the Senate district. Trust me, you don't want to explain this to 1,000 senators. I appreciate the help, Steve said, but I'm not going anywhere until I understand what's happening. And I'm not going to be anyone's prisoner. I'm not trying to arrest you. Anakin met his gaze directly, and Steve saw honesty there. But if you stay here, someone else will come. Someone who won't give you a choice. At least let me take you to someone who might help. My wife. He stopped abruptly. A senator I know. She's smart, and she understands how to navigate Republic politics. If anyone can help you, it's her. The word wife had been almost swallowed, hidden. A secret. Steve filed that away. Why would a Jedi Knight hide being married? But nodded. All right, lead the way. As Anakin gestured toward a sleek speeder parked at the platform's edge, Steve took one last look at the impossible cityscape around him. Somewhere, in another reality, his team was probably searching for him. Bucky, Peggy, the Howling Commandos. They'd never find him here. He was alone in a galaxy at war, with no way home. But he'd been alone before. He'd been the underdog before. And if this Anakin Skywalker was anything like the soldiers Steve had fought beside, then maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to help end this war and get back to his own. What Steve didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that he'd just met the most important person in the galaxy at the most critical moment in history. In 3 days, Anakin Skywalker would be offered the power to save his wife's life in exchange for his soul. And in 3 days, Captain America would have to make a choice. Save one man, or let destiny consume a galaxy. The Force had brought them together. But it would be Steve Rogers' unshakable belief in doing the right thing that would decide what happened next. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The speeder cut through Coruscant's traffic lanes with practiced ease, Anakin piloting with one hand while the other rested near the controls. Steve gripped the edge of his seat, his enhanced senses processing the organized chaos around them. Thousands of vehicles moved in coordinated streams, some hauling cargo, others carrying what looked like families. Holographic advertisements flickered past in languages his mind couldn't parse, though his tactical training automatically mapped exit routes and defensive positions even 500 meters above the ground. You handle this well, Anakin said, glancing sideways. Most off-worlders from low-tech planets spend their first speeder ride looking like they're about to be sick. I've flown before, Steve replied, watching a massive transport ship descend toward a distant landing platform. Different technology, but the principle's the same. Trust your pilot and stay alert. He paused. Though I've never seen a city this big, how many people live here? 1 trillion, give or take. Coruscant's been the Republic's capital for thousands of years. Every level you see has 50 more beneath it, going down kilometers. The lower you go, the darker it gets. Anakin's jaw tightened. The Senate likes to pretend those levels don't exist. There was anger in those words. Carefully controlled but present. Steve recognized it. The frustration of a soldier who saw problems his leaders ignored. Sounds familiar, he said. Back home, we had plenty of politicians more interested in looking good than doing good. Anakin shot him a surprised look, then something like relief crossed his face. The Jedi Council would say I shouldn't think like that. That I should trust in the Republic's institutions. That anger leads to the dark side. He said it like quoting a lesson he'd heard too many times. But sometimes I wonder if being detached from emotion means being detached from caring about what's right. Steve considered his words carefully. He didn't understand this force or the dark side Anakin mentioned, but he understood the tone. Where I come from, we had a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Caring about injustice isn't wrong. It's what you do with that feeling that matters. The speeder banked sharply, diving toward a residential tower that looked more elegant than the surrounding buildings. Anakin's hands moved with unconscious precision, guiding them toward a private landing platform shielded by what looked like energy barriers. That's not what the Council would say. They'd tell you attachment to outcomes clouds judgment, that a Jedi should act without personal investment. Sounds like a good way to stop caring about the people you're supposed to protect, Steve said quietly. Anakin didn't respond, but his knuckles whitened on the controls. They landed smoothly, and the energy barrier shimmered as it recognized the speeder's signature. As they disembarked, Steve noticed security cameras tracking their movement, sophisticated, but not intrusive. A safe house, or at least a private one. Wait here, Anakin said, moving toward the entrance. He spoke briefly into a comm device, his voice too low for even Steve's enhanced hearing to catch. Moments later, the door opened, and a woman emerged. Steve understood immediately why Anakin had stumbled over the word wife. The way Anakin's entire posture changed when he saw her. The way his shoulders relaxed, the unconscious step forward, the softening of his features, spoke of deep love carefully hidden. The woman was beautiful, dressed in elegant robes that suggested nobility, her dark hair elaborately styled. But it was her eyes that caught Steve's attention, intelligent, compassionate, and currently filled with concern. Anakin, what's going on? You said it was urgent. Her gaze moved to Steve, taking in his tactical suit, the shield, the foreign design of his equipment. Who is this? Padme. This is Captain Steve Rogers. He's not from here. Not from anywhere in the Republic. Anakin gestured helplessly. He appeared out of nowhere above the Senate district, tore a hole in the Force itself. Padme's eyes widened. That's impossible. I would have said the same thing an hour ago, Steve said, stepping forward with his shield lowered to show he meant no threat. Ma'am, I don't fully understand what's happened to me, but I need help. I need to understand where I am, what this war is about, and how I can get home. She studied him for a long moment, and Steve saw her making rapid calculations. Political mind, tactical assessment, measuring risks and benefits. You speak basic, but your accent is unlike anything I've heard. Your equipment is definitely not Republic or Separatist technology, and Anakin trusts you enough to bring you to my home. She glanced at Anakin. Does the Council know? Not yet. I wanted to bring him somewhere safe first. Somewhere he could get answers without being treated like a prisoner or a weapon. Anakin's voice carried an edge. The Council's first instinct will be to lock him up and interrogate him. You know how they are with unknowns. Padme nodded slowly. Come inside, quickly before someone notices. She led them through the entrance into an apartment that spoke of refined taste and senatorial privilege. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the cityscape, and the interior was decorated with art from dozens of worlds. But Steve noticed the security features too. Reinforced doors, multiple exits, communication arrays that could reach across the galaxy. Once inside, Padme activated a privacy field. Steve felt a subtle shift in the air pressure, and turned to face them both. All right. Tell me everything. Steve gave her the abbreviated version. The war against Hydra, the Tesseract, the explosion of energy that ripped him from his reality. He kept it concise, military briefing style, focusing on facts over speculation. Anakin listened with growing fascination, while Padme's expression grew more troubled. Another universe entirely, she said when he finished. I've heard theories about dimensional travel, but nothing concrete. The Jedi archives might have something, but accessing them would mean involving the Council. Which brings us back to the problem. Anakin said, pacing now. The moment the Council knows about him, they'll want to control the situation. Master Windu will call for containment. Master Yoda will want to study how he exists outside the Force. And if Palpatine hears about it... Palpatine? Steve asked. Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, Padme explained. He's been granted emergency powers during the war. He's a complicated figure. Charismatic, politically brilliant, but the emergency powers were supposed to be temporary. The war's been going on for 3 years now, and he shows no sign of relinquishing control. Steve's instincts prickled. That's how democracies fall. Emergency powers that never end. I've seen it before back home. A man named Schmidt used fear and war to seize absolute control. What happened to him? Anakin asked. I stopped him, but not before millions died. Steve met Anakin's gaze. The thing about tyrants, they're always charismatic at first. They promise security, order, strength. By the time people realize what they've given up, it's too late. Padme and Anakin exchanged a look loaded with unspoken communication. Steve saw the concern there, the shared worry about something they couldn't quite articulate. You see it too, he said quietly. Something's wrong with how this war is being fought. The Republic's ideals are good, Padme said carefully. But the war has changed things, changed people. We're becoming what we're fighting against, and anyone who questions it is labeled a separatist sympathizer. And the Jedi? Steve asked. Anakin's expression darkened. The Jedi serve the Republic. We've become generals, leading clone armies into battle. We tell ourselves we're peacekeepers, but we're warriors now. And the Council. He stopped himself, visibly fighting for control. The Council has forgotten that the Force is supposed to guide us, not blind us. They're so focused on following the code that they've lost sight of why the code exists. Steve heard the pain in those words, the frustration of a good man trapped in an impossible situation. He'd seen it in soldiers during the war, men asked to follow orders that conflicted with their conscience, caught between duty and morality. You don't agree with them, he observed. I believe in protecting people, Anakin said. I believe in fighting for what's right. But the Council wants us to be detached, emotionless. They say attachment leads to jealousy, to the dark side of the Force. But how can you fight for people if you don't care about them? You can't, Steve said simply. A soldier who doesn't care about what he's protecting isn't a soldier. He's just a weapon. Anakin stared at him, and Steve saw something shift in the young Jedi's expression. Recognition, maybe, or relief at finally hearing someone validate what he'd felt but couldn't say. Padme placed a gentle hand on Anakin's arm, a gesture of comfort that confirmed Steve's suspicion about their relationship. So, what do we do? Padme asked. Captain Rogers can't hide here indefinitely. Eventually, someone will detect the energy signature from his arrival. The Jedi, Republic intelligence, maybe even separatist spies. He needs protection, information, and a way to exist in this galaxy without becoming a political pawn. I can protect myself, Steve said, but I won't lie. I'm operating blind here. I don't know your politics, your technology, or your enemies. Where I come from, I fought because I couldn't stand by and watch bullies win. If this war is what you say it is, if there's something corrupt at the heart of it, then maybe I landed here for a reason. Anakin's eyes lit up with something between hope and desperation. You'd help us? Even though this isn't your galaxy, isn't your fight? Steve thought of Bucky, of Peggy, of every person he'd ever fought to protect. He thought of his conversation with Dr. Erskine, the night before the serum. Whatever happens tomorrow, you must promise me one thing, that you will stay who you are. Not a perfect soldier, but a good man. I don't run from fights, Steve said, especially when good people need help. So, yes, until I find a way home, I'll do what I can. But I need you both to be straight with me. What's really happening in this galaxy? And why do I get the feeling that you two are sitting on a secret that's tearing you apart? Padme and Anakin looked at each other, and in that moment, Steve saw the full weight of what they were hiding. Love in a time of war. A Jedi who'd broken his order's most fundamental rule, two people trying to hold together a relationship that the galaxy said shouldn't exist. That, Anakin said quietly, is a long story. And one that could get us all killed if the wrong people found out. Then we'd better make sure the wrong people don't find out, Steve said. He extended his hand. In my world, we had a saying. We're in this together. If you're willing to trust me, I'll trust you. Deal? Anakin gripped his hand, and Steve felt the strength in that grip, the strength of someone who'd fought too many battles, carried too much weight. Deal, Anakin said. Though I should warn you, Captain Rogers, secrets have a way of coming out in this galaxy. And when they do, they tend to destroy everything around them. Steve didn't know how prophetic those words would be. In 2 days, Anakin's greatest secret would be the least of their concerns. Because in 2 days, the Chancellor would reveal his true identity, and Steve Rogers would find himself in a fight, not just for one man's soul, but for the fate of an entire galaxy. The Jedi Temple rose above Coruscant like a mountain of marble and conviction, its spires reaching toward the stars with the confidence of an order that had endured for millennia. Steve studied it through the speeder's viewport, as Anakin piloted them toward the massive structure, noting the defensive positions, the guard towers disguised as architectural flourishes, the way the entire building commanded the surrounding district. A fortress pretending to be a monastery. Having second thoughts? Anakin asked, reading Steve's expression. Just observing. Where I come from, we'd call this a hard target. Steve adjusted his shield, which was now concealed beneath a borrowed cloak. Padme had insisted he needed to look less like a foreign soldier and more like a traveler seeking sanctuary. The cloak didn't quite hide his build or his gear, but it was better than walking in looking like he was ready for combat. You're sure about this? No, Anakin admitted, but Padme's right. We can't keep you hidden forever. Better to control how the Council learns about you than let them discover you on their own. He guided the speeder toward a landing platform reserved for Jedi Knights. Just remember, the Council values order and protocol. Don't challenge them directly. Master Windu especially. He sees threats everywhere these days. Steve had spent the previous night in Padme's apartment, learning what he could about the Republic, the Separatists, and the Jedi Order. The more he learned, the less he liked. A democratic republic stretched across thousands of worlds, now fighting a civil war orchestrated by what Anakin described as corporate interests and political opportunists. The Jedi, once mediators and peacekeepers, had become generals commanding an army of clones, genetically identical soldiers bred for war. And at the center of it all, Chancellor Palpatine, accumulating power with each emergency decree. It reminded Steve too much of Europe in the 1930s, the slow slide toward autocracy, dressed up in the language of security and necessity. The speeder touched down, and 2 Jedi were already waiting, a tall man with dark skin and a stern expression, and a smaller figure leaning on a walking stick. Both wore the same layered robes as Anakin, but with an air of authority that spoke of rank. Skywalker, the tall man said, his voice carrying disapproval. You were supposed to report to the Council 3 hours ago. Instead, you land here with an unidentified individual whose arrival triggered every Force-sensitive alarm in the temple. Master Windu, Master Yoda, Anakin said, bowing slightly. I can explain. Explain, you should, the smaller figure, Yoda, said. His voice was reedy, but carried weight. Ancient eyes studied Steve with unnerving intensity. A disturbance in the Force, we felt. A tear in the fabric of reality. And at its center this man. Sense him in the Force I cannot. A void he is. Most troubling. Steve stepped forward, pushing back the hood of his cloak. No point in hiding now. My name is Captain Steve Rogers. I'm not from your galaxy, and I'm not here by choice. I was caught in an accident involving technology that tore through dimensional barriers. I mean no harm to you or your order. Mace Windu's hand moved to his lightsaber, not drawing it, but ready. Convenient story. The Separatists have been developing new weapons. How do we know you're not one of them? Because I just told you I'm not, Steve said evenly. Where I come from, a man's word meant something. If you want proof, I'll provide what I can. But I won't be treated like a prisoner when I've done nothing wrong. Your very existence is wrong, Windu said sharply. You exist outside the Force. That shouldn't be possible. Everything living is connected to the Force. But you're like a shadow, a blank space where a person should be. Patience, Mace, Yoda said, though his gaze never left Steve. Hostile, he does not appear. Curious this is. Come, Captain Rogers. To the council chamber. You will. Questions we have. Answers you will provide. It wasn't a request. Steve glanced at Anakin, who nodded slightly. Trust me. They followed the two Jedi Masters into the temple, through corridors of polished stone where Jedi of various species moved with purposeful calm. Some stopped to stare at Steve, and he felt their attention like physical weight. Whatever this force was, his absence from it clearly disturbed them. The council chamber was circular, with tall windows overlooking the city. 12 seats arranged in a circle, currently occupied by 10 Jedi Masters of varying species and ages. All of them focused on Steve the moment he entered, and the pressure of their combined attention made his enhanced senses flare with warning. Captain Rogers, Yoda said, settling into his seat. Tell us your story, you will. From the beginning. Steve did. Keeping his tone professional and his facts clear. He explained the war against Hydra, the Tesseract, the energy explosion. He described his world, one planet, no knowledge of aliens or galactic civilization, technology that would seem primitive here. He watched their reactions, cataloging who believed him and who remained skeptical. Most were skeptical. A fascinating tale, said a Jedi with a long beard and kind eyes. Ki Adi Mundi, Anakin had mentioned him. But difficult to verify. We have no way to confirm your origins, and your story relies entirely on your word. I'm aware of that, Steve said. But I'm not asking you to take anything on faith. I'm asking for information. How did I get here? Is there a way back? And while I'm here, what can I do to help? Help! Windu's tone was sharp. You want to involve yourself in a war you don't understand, in a galaxy you know nothing about? I understand war, Steve said. I understand people being oppressed. I understand fighting for what's right. And from what Anakin's told me, this republic is worth fighting for. Several council members glanced at Anakin, and Steve saw the young Jedi stiffen. You've been discussing republic politics with this stranger? Windu asked. He asked questions, Anakin said. Was I supposed to lie to him? You were supposed to bring him directly to us, Windu snapped. Not make independent decisions about how to handle a potentially dangerous unknown. Dangerous? Anakin's voice rose. He saved himself from a 5-kilometer fall and then cooperated peacefully. If he wanted to cause harm, he's had plenty of opportunity. Enough, Yoda said, raising a hand. Arguing amongst ourselves we should not. Captain Rogers, understand your position. You must. Outside the Force, you exist. Unprecedented this is. Dangerous, it could be. Until more we know, contained you must be. I'm not going to be anyone's prisoner, Steve said firmly. Not a prisoner, Yoda corrected. A guest. In the temple, you will remain. Observe you. We will. Learn about this dimensional travel. We must. Perhaps in our archives answers there are. It was a gilded cage, but still a cage. Steve met Yoda's gaze directly. And if I refuse? Then you will be confined by force, Windu said. You don't understand what you represent, Captain. A being that exists outside the Force is a contradiction. It suggests the Force is not all-encompassing, not absolute. That threatens the foundation of everything the Jedi understand about the universe. So this is about protecting your beliefs, Steve said, not about doing what's right. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Anakin closed his eyes briefly, as if anticipating an explosion. You presume much, Windu said coldly, for someone who arrived yesterday. I presume that the truth matters more than comfortable lies, Steve replied. I've seen what happens when institutions prioritize their own authority over the people they're meant to serve. It doesn't end well. Interesting perspective, said a female Jedi with a gentle voice. Shak Ti. Tell me, Captain, What do you see when you look at our order? Steve considered his words carefully. These were powerful people, and making enemies would serve no purpose, but lying wouldn't help either. I see an organization that started with noble intentions. I see people who genuinely want to help. But I also see an order that's become part of the system it was supposed to watch over. You've become generals in a political war. You've compromised your principles for pragmatism. And from what I can tell, you're so busy maintaining control that you've stopped questioning whether you're doing the right thing. The silence was deafening. Bold words, Windu said, from a man who knows nothing of the sacrifices we've made. I know sacrifice, Steve said quietly. I left everyone I cared about behind to stop a madman. I've watched good men die following orders they didn't agree with. I've seen war up close, Master Windu. And the one thing I learned is that the moment you stop questioning your choices, you become what you're fighting against. Yoda's ears twitched, and something that might have been approval flickered in his ancient eyes. Wisdom, you speak. But wisdom without understanding, dangerous can be. Stay, you will. Learn our ways, we will teach. And in return, about your world, you will tell us. It wasn't what Steve wanted, but it was better than a cell. He nodded slowly. Agreed, but I want access to your archives. If there's information about dimensional travel or the Tesseract's energy signature, I need to find it. Supervised access, Windu said. And Skywalker will not be your handler. He's already shown poor judgment in this matter. Anakin's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Steve saw the flash of anger in the young Jedi's eyes. Quickly suppressed. Another slight, another moment of the Council dismissing his decisions. How many of those moments had there been? How many times had they undermined him until he stopped trusting his own judgment? Then who? Steve asked. Obi-Wan Kenobi will supervise you, Yoda said. Anakin's former master. Wise he is, patient. And questions, he asks. Good for you both, this will be. The council session continued for another hour, with various masters asking questions about Earth, about the Tesseract, about Steve's enhanced physiology. He answered what he could, though some questions touched on classified information he wouldn't reveal even here. When they finally dismissed him, Anakin escorted him to quarters in the temple's guest wing. That went better than I expected, Anakin said once they were alone. You challenged Windu directly and you're still walking free. I don't think I made any friends, Steve replied. No, but you made them think. That's more than most people manage. Anakin paused outside the door to Steve's quarters. About what you said, about the council compromising their principles. You're not wrong. We've become something we never should have been. Warriors instead of peacekeepers. The clone army fights our battles while we lead them like military officers. Sometimes I wonder if we've already lost what we were trying to protect. Then why stay? Steve asked. If you don't believe in what they're doing, why follow orders you disagree with? Anakin's expression grew pained. Because I'm a Jedi. Because I made vows. Because if people like me leave, who's left to try to do the right thing? He met Steve's gaze. But there are days when I wonder if trying to change the system from inside just makes you part of the problem. Steve recognized that look. The look of a good man trapped between duty and conscience. Anakin, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Padme, you love her, don't you? Anakin froze, his hand moving instinctively toward his lightsaber before he caught himself. I don't know what you... I'm not going to tell anyone, Steve said quickly. But I've seen the way you look at her, the way she looks at you. And I heard what the council said. Jedi aren't supposed to form attachments. That's why you're hiding it. Anakin's shoulders slumped. Jedi aren't supposed to fall in love, we're supposed to be above such things. But I can't... His voice cracked slightly. She's everything to me. The only thing that makes sense in a galaxy going insane. The council would expel me if they knew. Probably worse. That's wrong, Steve said firmly. Love doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. It gives you something worth fighting for. The Jedi would say attachment leads to jealousy, jealousy leads to fear, and fear leads to the dark side. Anakin recited it like a lesson burned into memory. They'd say my love for Padme makes me vulnerable to corruption. Or maybe it makes you human, Steve countered. Maybe the real danger is an order that teaches its members to suppress everything that makes them care about people. How can you protect something if you're not allowed to love it? Anakin stared at him, and Steve saw years of suppressed doubt and guilt warring in the young Jedi's expression. I've never heard anyone outside Padme say that before. Every Jedi I know would tell me I'm wrong to feel what I feel, that I should let go of attachment. Then maybe they're wrong, Steve said. In my experience, the people who tell you not to care are usually the ones who've already given up on caring themselves. Don't let them take that from you, Anakin. Your capacity to love isn't a weakness. It's your greatest strength. For a moment, Steve saw hope in Anakin's eyes. Real hope, like a drowning man glimpsing shore. But then it faded, replaced by something darker. You don't understand. The things I've done in this war. The compromises I've made. Sometimes I wonder if the Council is right to doubt me. Sometimes I wonder if I'm already too far gone. You're not, Steve said with absolute conviction. I've seen good men break under the weight of war. I've seen them lose themselves. But I've also seen them find their way back. As long as you're still questioning yourself, still trying to do right, you haven't lost. The real danger is when you stop caring altogether. Anakin nodded slowly, though Steve could see the words hadn't fully penetrated the layers of doubt and self-recrimination. Get some rest, Captain. Tomorrow, Obi-Wan will start your orientation. He's a good man. Rigid sometimes, follows the code too strictly, but he means well. You'll like him. And you? Steve asked. What will you do? What I always do. Follow orders, fight battles, try to hold together a marriage that's illegal and a faith that's killing me. Anakin's smile was bitter. The life of a Jedi Knight. He left before Steve could respond. Alone in his quarters, Steve removed his shield and set it against the wall, then moved to the window. The Coruscant skyline stretched endlessly in every direction, a monument to civilization's triumph over nature. But underneath all that gleaming progress, he sensed the same rot he'd seen in his own time. Corruption masked as security, tyranny dressed up as order, and good people ground down by systems that had forgotten why they existed. He thought of Dr. Erskine's words. The serum amplifies everything that is inside, so good becomes great, bad becomes worse. What would a galaxy-spanning system amplify? If the Republic was built on good intentions, what would 3 years of total war turn it into? And if Palpatine was accumulating power the way Anakin and Padme suggested, what would happen when those emergency powers became permanent? Steve didn't have answers, but he knew one thing. Anakin Skywalker was standing on a precipice, torn between competing loyalties and slowly being crushed by the weight of expectations he could never meet. The Council saw a soldier to command. Palpatine, whoever he really was, probably saw a weapon to wield. But Steve saw what they all seemed to miss. A young man desperate for someone to believe in him without demanding he sacrifice everything that made him human. Or whatever the equivalent was in a galaxy far from home. Tomorrow, he'd start learning about the Force, about the Jedi archives, about finding a way home. But tonight, he'd think about Anakin Skywalker, and about the feeling in his gut that told him the young Jedi was heading for a fall that would shake this entire galaxy. Steve Rogers had always been good at spotting the underdog, the person everyone else had written off. He'd been that person once, small and sickly, dismissed as useless by everyone who looked at him. Maybe that's why he'd been brought here. Not to fight a war or change history, but to stand beside one good man and refuse to let him fall. It was a small thing, in a galaxy at war. But Steve had learned long ago that sometimes the smallest choices had the biggest consequences. The nightmare started the same way it always did. Padme, lying on a medical table, her face twisted in agony, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her hand reaching for him, but he couldn't move, couldn't help, couldn't save her. And then she was gone, slipping away despite everything he'd done, despite all his power, despite his love. Just gone. Anakin woke in the pre-dawn darkness of the apartment, his heart hammering, sweat soaking through his sleep clothes. Beside him, Padme stirred, her hand finding his in the darkness. "The dream again?" she whispered. He couldn't speak, could only nod. The dream had been coming for weeks now, always the same, always ending with her death. The Force showed him visions sometimes, glimpses of possible futures, but this felt different, more real, more certain. Like watching a recording of something that had already happened, or inevitably would. "It's just a dream, Ani," Padme said softly, pulling him close. "I'm fine. The baby's fine. We're both healthy." "You don't understand," Anakin said, his voice rough. "I've had dreams like this before, about my mother. I saw her suffering, dying, and I ignored it. By the time I reached her, it was too late. I held her while she died and I couldn't do anything." His hands clenched into fists. "I won't let that happen to you. I can't." Padme sat up, activating a dim light. In its glow, Anakin could see the concern in her eyes, but also something else. Fear. Not of dying. Padme had faced assassins, political enemies, even battle droids without flinching. No, this was fear of what his fear might drive him to do. "Anakin, listen to me," she said, taking his face in her hands. "You're one of the most powerful Jedi in the Order. You've fought in hundreds of battles, you've saved countless lives, but you can't control everything. Some things are beyond even your power." "No," he said fiercely. "There has to be a way. The Force is supposed to be all-powerful, right? The Jedi use it to do impossible things. There has to be a way to prevent death." "The Jedi also teach that death is a natural part of life," Padme said gently. "That letting go." "The Jedi teach a lot of things," Anakin interrupted, pulling away. "They teach that attachment leads to the dark side, that love makes you weak, that I should suppress every emotion that makes me human." He caught himself. "That makes me who I am. But Captain Rogers said something yesterday. He said love isn't a weakness. He said the real danger is not caring at all." Padme's expression softened. "He seems like a good man. Anakin, I know you're frustrated with the Council. I know they don't understand what we have. But you can't let that push you toward—" "Toward what?" Anakin asked. "Toward wanting to save the person I love? Toward refusing to accept that I might lose you? Toward making choices you can't take back," Padme said quietly. "You've been spending more time with the Chancellor lately. He encourages your frustration with the Jedi. He tells you what you want to hear. But Ani, I worry about his influence on you." Anakin stood, pacing to the window. The sun was rising over Coruscant, painting the endless cityscape in shades of amber and gold. "Palpatine is the only person in this entire republic who treats me like I'm worth listening to. The Council gives me orders and expects obedience. They give me the title of Jedi Knight but won't make me a master. They put me on the Council as the Chancellor's representative but won't grant me full status. It's like they're saying I'm powerful enough to use but not wise enough to trust. Maybe they're afraid of your power," Padme suggested. "The Council values control, contemplation. You're passionate, impulsive. You challenge their authority. That threatens them. Or maybe they see something in me that I'm trying to pretend isn't there," Anakin said bitterly. He thought of Steve's words about institutions that stopped questioning themselves. "Sometimes I wonder if the Jedi Order deserves to survive this war. Maybe we've become too rigid, too detached. Maybe that's why we're losing." "You don't mean that, don't I?" Anakin turned to face her. "How many times have I asked the Council for guidance about these visions? How many times have they told me to release my attachment and trust in the Force? They won't help me save you because saving you would mean admitting that Jedi can love, that attachment isn't inherently evil. Their philosophy matters more to them than your life." Padme crossed to him, placing a hand over his heart. "Then don't ask them. Ask someone else, someone who might understand." "Who?" "Captain Rogers," she said. "You said he lost people he loved in his war. He understands sacrifice. Maybe he can offer perspective the Jedi can't." Anakin considered it. Steve was an outsider, unburdened by Jedi doctrine or Sith philosophy. He'd spoken about love as strength, about caring as the reason to fight. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he could help. "I'll talk to him," Anakin said. "But Padme, if these visions are real, if you're really in danger, I'll do whatever it takes to save you. Whatever it takes. I won't lose you like I lost my mother." She held him close, and he felt the flutter of their child between them, life growing despite the war raging across the galaxy. "I know," she whispered. "That's what scares me." Steve woke to find a bearded man sitting in his quarters, calmly reading from a datapad. The man looked up as Steve reached for his shield, raising a hand in a calming gesture. "Peace, Captain Rogers. I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. I apologize for entering without permission, but Jedi quarters don't have traditional locks. We tend to rely on Force sensitivity to detect intruders." He smiled slightly. "Which obviously doesn't work with you." Steve relaxed marginally but kept his shield close. "You're Anakin's former master." "Indeed. Also his current partner in the field, his frequent source of exasperation, and apparently now your designated guardian during your stay in the temple." Obi-Wan set down the datapad. "I've spent the morning reading Anakin's report of your arrival. Fascinating stuff. Dimensional travel, an energy source that could tear holes in reality, enhanced physiology that functions without the Force. You're quite the puzzle, Captain." "Not trying to be," Steve said. "Just trying to understand where I am and how to get home." "A reasonable goal. I've arranged access to the archives for this morning. Master Jocasta Nu is not pleased about allowing someone Force-blind to enter, but she's agreed to supervise." Obi-Wan stood, his movements economical and precise. "But first, breakfast. Even dimensional travelers need to eat, I assume?" Steve's stomach growled in response, and Obi-Wan's smile widened. "The temple refectory it is." They walked through the morning-lit corridors, passing Jedi in various stages of training. Young children practiced lightsaber forms under careful supervision. Older students meditated in groups, their faces serene. Everyone they passed acknowledged Obi-Wan with respect and studied Steve with undisguised curiosity. "They're staring," Steve observed. "You're a man who exists outside the Force in a temple full of people who define their entire existence through the Force," Obi-Wan said. "I'd be more concerned if they weren't staring. Though I imagine you're used to attention. Anakin mentioned you're a soldier from your world's equivalent of a great war." "I am. Was. I don't know what tense to use when you're torn out of your own timeline." Steve paused. "He also said you're a good man, that you follow the code, maybe too strictly, but that you mean well." Obi-Wan's eyebrow rose. High praise from Anakin, considering how often he thinks the code is more hindrance than help. "Tell me, Captain, what do you think of our order? I understand you gave the Council quite an earful yesterday." "I think you started with good intentions," Steve said carefully. "But somewhere along the way, you forgot that rules serve people, not the other way around. You've built a philosophy that demands Jedi suppress everything that makes them feel connected to others. That's not wisdom. That's fear." "Fear of the dark side," Obi-Wan said. "Fear of what passion and attachment can drive people to do. We've seen countless Jedi fall to the dark side because they couldn't control their emotions. The code protects us from that. Or it creates pressure that eventually explodes," Steve countered. "In my experience, people who suppress their emotions don't make them go away. They just push them down until they can't hold them anymore. Then they break in ways that hurt everyone around them." They entered the refectory, a large hall where dozens of Jedi ate and conversed in quiet tones. Obi-Wan guided Steve to a quieter corner, collecting food that looked alien but smelled edible. Once seated, he regarded Steve thoughtfully. "You're thinking of Anakin," he said. Steve met his gaze. "Am I wrong?" Obi-Wan sighed, suddenly looking much older than his years. "No, you're not wrong. Anakin is the most gifted Jedi I've ever known. His connection to the Force is unprecedented, but he's also the most conflicted. He carries anger, fear, passion, all the things the code warns against. I've tried to guide him, to help him find peace through detachment. But the harder I push, the more he resists." Maybe because detachment isn't what he needs, Steve said. Maybe he needs someone to tell him it's okay to care, that his emotions don't make him weak or wrong. That's a dangerous philosophy, Obi-Wan said. Emotion clouds judgment. It leads to impulsive decisions, to putting personal concerns above the greater good. Anakin's attachments make him vulnerable. They also make him fight, Steve argued. Give him something worth protecting. Would you rather have a Jedi who fights because the code tells him to, or one who fights because he genuinely cares about the people he's protecting? Obi-Wan was quiet for a long moment, stirring his food without eating. When I took Anakin as my Padawan, I was barely more than a boy myself. I'd just lost my own master. I wasn't ready to train someone as powerful and complicated as Anakin. I tried to follow the code, to teach him what I'd been taught. But I think... He trailed off, then met Steve's eyes. I think I failed him. Not in his training, he's an exceptional warrior, but in understanding what he needed, in being what he needed. Steve heard genuine pain in those words. It's not too late, he said. Whatever's broken can be fixed, but it requires meeting him where he is, not where the code says he should be. Easier said than done when you're trying to hold together an order that's crumbling around you, Obi-Wan said. The war has changed everything, Captain. We've become generals when we should be peacekeepers. We follow politicians when we should follow the Force. And Jedi like Anakin, powerful, passionate, frustrated. They're the ones who feel the strain most acutely. Before Steve could respond, his enhanced hearing caught footsteps approaching with purpose. Anakin emerged from the crowd, his expression tight with barely contained emotion. Obi-Wan. Captain Rogers. He nodded to each of them. I need to speak with the captain. Alone, if possible. Obi-Wan studied his former apprentice with concern. Anakin, are you all right? You look... I'm fine, Anakin said too quickly. Just need to discuss something with Captain Rogers. Jedi business. It clearly wasn't Jedi business, but Obi-Wan stood gracefully. Very well. Captain, meet me at the archives entrance in 1 hour. We'll begin your research then. He placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder. And Anakin? Whatever's troubling you, I'm here if you need to talk. I know, Anakin said, but his tone suggested he wouldn't take that offer. Obi-Wan left, and Anakin slid into his seat, his hands clenching and unclenching on the table. What's wrong? Steve asked. I need advice, Anakin said. And I can't ask the Council because I already know what they'll say. I can't ask Obi-Wan because he'll try to make it about the code. You're the only person who might understand. I'll help if I can. Anakin took a deep breath. I've been having visions, dreams, about Padme dying. I see her in pain, suffering, and I can't save her. The dreams are getting stronger, more frequent. I think they're real. I think the Force is warning me that she's going to die. Steve's enhanced senses caught the tremor in Anakin's voice, the genuine terror. Does she know? I told her this morning. She thinks I'm overreacting. She says I can't control everything. Anakin's voice hardened. But I have to. I lost my mother because I ignored the warnings. I won't make that mistake again. What do the Jedi say about these visions? They say to let go, to release my attachment, to trust that death is a natural part of the Force. Anakin's hands clenched into fists. They want me to accept her death before it even happens. How can they ask that? How can they expect me to just let the person I love die when I might have the power to prevent it? Steve leaned back, choosing his words carefully. This was dangerous ground. A man desperate to save someone he loved could make terrible choices. He'd seen it before, in soldiers who'd tried to save wounded brothers in arms and gotten themselves killed in the process. Anakin, I understand the fear. I've lost people too. Good people. People I cared about deeply. And yeah, it tore me apart. But there's a difference between doing everything you can to protect someone and destroying yourself, and everything you stand for, trying to prevent the inevitable. So you're saying I should just accept it? Anakin's voice rose slightly, causing nearby Jedi to glance over. He lowered it. That I should let her die? I'm saying you need to be careful, Steve said firmly. Fear makes us do things we'd never consider otherwise. It makes us compromise our principles. And once you start down that path, it's hard to come back. He met Anakin's desperate gaze. What are you willing to do to save her? What line wouldn't you cross? Anakin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. And that's what scares me. Then that's your answer, Steve said. If you don't know your own limits, you're already in danger. Before you do anything, you need to figure out who you are and what you're willing to sacrifice. Because I guarantee you, whatever path you're considering, it'll demand more than you think you're giving. There might be a way, Anakin said suddenly, a way to prevent death. The Chancellor mentioned it once. Ancient Sith knowledge, techniques the Jedi have forgotten or suppressed. Ways to manipulate life itself through the Force. Every instinct Steve had screamed warning. The Chancellor? Palpatine? He's been a mentor to me since I was a child, Anakin said defensively. He's the only person in the Republic who treats me like I'm worth listening to, and he understands things the Jedi don't. He's not afraid of knowledge just because it's dangerous. Anakin, listen to yourself, Steve said urgently. You're talking about Sith knowledge, dark side techniques. Everything you've told me says that's a corruption of everything the Jedi stand for. Maybe the Jedi are wrong, Anakin's voice rose again. Maybe the dark side isn't just evil. Maybe it's just another aspect of the Force that the Jedi are too afraid to understand. The Chancellor says the dark side offers abilities the Jedi consider unnatural. What if those abilities could save Padme? Steve leaned forward, keeping his voice low and intense. In my world, there was a scientist named Schmidt. He wanted power to reshape the world, to create what he called the master race. He justified every atrocity by saying he was doing what was necessary. And you know what? He probably believed it. He probably convinced himself that the ends justified any means. He held Anakin's gaze. Power that comes from darkness always demands a price, and the price is usually your soul. You don't understand, Anakin said desperately. You didn't lose your mother because you were too weak to save her. You haven't seen the woman you love die in visions that feel more real than waking life. You haven't spent years being told you're special, powerful, the chosen one, only to be helpless when it actually matters. You're right, Steve said quietly. I haven't. But I have spent my entire life being told I wasn't good enough, that I was too weak, too small, too sickly to matter. And when I finally got power, when I became strong enough to make a difference, I had to choose what kind of man I'd be. Would I use that power for myself or for others? Would I let fear drive me? Or would I hold on to what I believed in? What did you choose? Anakin asked. I chose to stay who I was, Steve said. A kid from Brooklyn who hated bullies and couldn't stand by when people were hurting. The power didn't change that. It just gave me the means to act on it. He reached across the table, his voice urgent. Anakin, you're one of the most powerful beings in this galaxy. But power without principle is just tyranny. If you use the dark side to save Padme, you might keep her alive. But will you still be the man she fell in love with? Or will you become something that destroys everything you're trying to protect? Anakin pulled back, conflict written across his face. I don't know what to do. The Council won't help. They'll just tell me to let go. And the Chancellor... He stopped abruptly. The Chancellor what? Steve pressed. Nothing. Forget I said anything. Anakin stood abruptly. I should go. I have duties. Council meetings. Anakin, wait. But the young Jedi was already walking away, his stride too fast, his shoulders too tense. Steve watched him disappear into the crowd, and a cold certainty settled in his gut. Anakin Skywalker was standing on a knife's edge, and the wrong push would send him tumbling into darkness. And this Chancellor Palpatine, whoever he was, seemed very interested in doing the pushing. Steve needed more information. He needed to understand the political situation, understand who Palpatine really was, and what influence he had over Anakin. The archives might have answers, and if they didn't, he'd find someone who did, because he'd seen desperate men make terrible choices before. He'd watched good soldiers become monsters when fear and grief overwhelmed their principles, and he'd be damned if he'd stand by and watch it happen again, especially when he might be able to stop it. He finished his meal quickly and made his way to the archive's entrance, where Obi-Wan was already waiting. The older Jedi looked troubled. "I saw Anakin leave," Obi-Wan said. He looked distressed. What did he want? Steve considered how much to share. Anakin had confided in him, but if he was truly in danger, secrecy might be the enemy. He's having visions about someone he cares about dying. He's scared, and he's considering desperate measures to prevent it. Obi-Wan's expression darkened. He came to me about nightmares several weeks ago. I told him to trust in the Force, that visions of the future are always in motion. But he's never been good at accepting things beyond his control. He paused. Who is he having visions about? I can't tell you that, Steve said. It's his secret to share. But Obi-Wan, he mentioned something that concerns me. He said Chancellor Palpatine told him about Sith techniques that could prevent death. Ancient dark side knowledge. Obi-Wan's face went pale. The Chancellor said that? You're certain? That's what Anakin told me. Why? What does it mean? It means... Obi-Wan struggled for words. The Chancellor shouldn't know about such things. That knowledge is restricted to the Jedi Council, and even then it's rarely discussed. For Palpatine to mention it casually to Anakin. He shook his head. The Council has suspected for years that a Sith Lord is manipulating the Republic. We've searched, investigated, but found nothing concrete. If Palpatine has knowledge of Sith techniques, you think he might be this Sith Lord? Steve asked. I don't know what to think, Obi-Wan admitted. Palpatine has been Anakin's mentor since he was 9 years old. He's been a friend to the Jedi Order, granted us authority in the war. But he's also accumulated unprecedented power. The emergency powers were supposed to be temporary, but the war continues and so does his authority. He met Steve's gaze. We need to investigate this carefully. If Palpatine is manipulating Anakin, using his fear and frustration to turn him toward darkness, then we're running out of time, Steve finished. Anakin's desperate. He's looking for any solution, any way to save the person he loves. If Palpatine offers him what he wants, he'll take it, Obi-Wan said grimly. Regardless of the cost. That's always been Anakin's weakness. He acts from his heart, not his head. It's what makes him a great Jedi in battle. He trusts his instincts. Fights with passion. But it also makes him vulnerable to manipulation. They entered the archives, a vast chamber filled with shelves of holocrons and data storage devices. An elderly female Jedi, Jocasta Nu, waited with obvious disapproval. Master Kenobi, she said crisply. I've prepared the section on dimensional anomalies and hyperspace irregularities. Though I must protest allowing a Force-blind individual access to our most sacred knowledge. Your protest is noted, Madame Nu, Obi-Wan said diplomatically. Captain Rogers is researching a way to return to his own dimension. Surely helping a displaced traveler find his way home aligns with Jedi principles. She sniffed but led them deeper into the archives. Steve marveled at the sheer volume of information. Millennia of accumulated knowledge, the history of thousands of worlds, all stored and categorized. Jocasta Nu pulled several holocrons from the shelves, activating them to display streams of data in languages Steve couldn't read. These are our records of dimensional travel theories, she said. Mostly speculation. A few documented cases of beings appearing from unknown space, but nothing as dramatic as your arrival. The Force has occasionally torn holes in reality during moments of extreme concentration of power. Supernovas, planetary destruction, conflicts between powerful Force users. But a device like your Tesseract? She shook her head. Such technology shouldn't exist. But it does, Steve said. Or did in my universe. Is there anything here about getting back? Jocasta Nu's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, Captain Rogers. Based on what I've read, dimensional barriers are effectively one way. The energy required to tear through reality is catastrophic. Surviving it once is remarkable. Attempting it deliberately would be... She trailed off meaningfully. Suicide, Steve finished. So I'm stuck here. Perhaps not permanently, Obi-Wan said. The Force works in mysterious ways. You were brought here for a reason. Perhaps when that reason is fulfilled, you'll find your way home. Steve wanted to argue, to demand concrete solutions instead of mystical platitudes. But he saw genuine sympathy in Obi-Wan's eyes, and arguing wouldn't change reality. He was trapped in a galaxy far from home, in the middle of a war he didn't understand, with no clear path back to everything he'd left behind. Bucky, Peggy, the Howling Commandos, the fight against Hydra. All of it beyond his reach now. Then I guess I'd better make myself useful here, Steve said. Obi-Wan, you said the Council suspects a Sith Lord is manipulating events. Tell me about the Sith. What are they? What do they want? Obi-Wan glanced at Jocasta Nu, who nodded permission. They moved to a more private section of the archives, and Obi-Wan activated a holocron that displayed the image of a red-skinned being with yellow eyes. The Sith are the Jedi's ancient enemies, Obi-Wan explained. They use the dark side of the Force, anger, hatred, passion, to gain power. For thousands of years they waged war against the Jedi. Eventually, they destroyed themselves through infighting. We thought them extinct for a millennium, until one appeared 10 years ago. What happened? He was killed, Obi-Wan said, by my master, Qui-Gon Jinn, though it cost Qui-Gon his life. But before he died, the Sith, Darth Maul, revealed that he was only an apprentice. His master survived. The Sith follow the rule of two, one master, one apprentice, always. Which means somewhere in the galaxy, a Sith Lord is orchestrating this war, playing both sides, working towards some goal we can't see. And you think it might be Palpatine, Steve said. I think someone close to power is manipulating events, Obi-Wan corrected. The war itself seems designed to weaken both the Republic and the Jedi. We're stretched thin, fighting on 1,000 fronts. The Senate is paralyzed by bureaucracy, and the clone army, created in secret, discovered at the perfect moment to save the Republic. It all seems too convenient. Like someone orchestrated the entire conflict, Steve said, his tactical mind putting pieces together. Create a threat. Offer a solution. Use the crisis to accumulate power. It's a classic authoritarian playbook. Exactly, Obi-Wan said. But proving it is another matter. Palpatine is beloved by the public. He's portrayed as a reluctant leader doing his best in impossible circumstances. Accusing him without evidence would tear the Republic apart. So what do? We watch, Obi-Wan said. We investigate. And we try to keep Anakin from making a choice he can't take back. He fixed Steve with an intense gaze. He trusts you. I don't know why. You've known each other less than a day. But I saw how he looked at you in the refectory. Like you were saying things he'd been desperate to hear. That makes you valuable, Captain Rogers. It also makes you dangerous. Dangerous how? You're validating his doubts about the Order, Obi-Wan said. Encouraging him to trust his emotions. In the short term, that might keep him stable. But if Palpatine offers him power, real power to achieve what he wants, your words about love and caring might be the justification Anakin uses to embrace darkness. Steve felt the weight of that responsibility. So what should I do? Tell him the Council's right? That he should suppress everything he feels? No, Obi-Wan said quietly. Because they're not entirely right. I've known that for years, but admitting it would mean questioning everything I was taught. Everything I believe. He looked older suddenly, burdened by doubt. Perhaps you were brought here to show us our failures, Captain Rogers. To hold up a mirror and force us to see what we've become. The Jedi Order was supposed to serve the Force, to bring balance. But we've become warriors in a political war, suppressing anything that doesn't fit our rigid philosophy. It's not too late to change, Steve said. Isn't it? Obi-Wan gestured to the archives around them. This is 1,000 years of accumulated wisdom and tradition. You're asking us to admit it might be wrong. That's not something institutions do easily. Before Steve could respond, an alarm blared through the temple. Jedi throughout the archives snapped to attention, hands moving to lightsabers. Obi-Wan's comlink chirped, and he answered it immediately. Master Kenobi, a voice said urgently. The Council requests your immediate presence. There's been an incident. General Grievous has been located. The Council is organizing an assault. I'll be right there. Obi-Wan closed the comlink and looked at Steve. I have to go. Grievous is the Separatist military commander. If we can capture or kill him, we might be able to end this war. What about Anakin? He'll be in the council chamber. The council will want him for the mission. Obi-Wan hesitated. Captain, I need you to do something for me. Stay close to Anakin, not in the field. You're not trained for that. But here, in the temple. Talk to him. Keep him grounded. I have a bad feeling about all of this. A bad feeling? A Jedi thing, Obi-Wan said with a slight smile. Trust in the Force. Though I suppose that's meaningless to you. Not meaningless, Steve said. Just unfamiliar. Be careful out there, Obi-Wan. Always. Obi-Wan clasped his shoulder briefly, then hurried from the archives. Steve stood alone among millennia of knowledge, feeling the weight of a galaxy's history pressing down on him. Somewhere in this vast city, Anakin Skywalker was making decisions that could change everything. And somewhere, a Sith Lord was manipulating events toward a goal Steve couldn't yet see. He thought of Dr. Erskine's final words before the assassination. Promise me you'll stay who you are. Not a perfect soldier, but a good man. Steve had made that promise. And he intended to keep it, even in a galaxy far from home. Even if it meant standing against destiny itself. Chancellor Palpatine's office occupied the summit of one of Coruscant's most prestigious towers, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the galactic capital. Anakin had been here hundreds of times over the years, for advice, for conversation, for the mentorship the Jedi Council never quite provided. But today, as he entered the familiar space, something felt different. The Chancellor sat behind his desk, his grandfatherly features arranged in an expression of concern. Anakin, my boy. Thank you for coming so quickly. I heard about the Council's decision to send Obi-Wan after Grievous. How did you... Anakin caught himself. The Council only decided an hour ago. I am the Supreme Chancellor, Palpatine said with a slight smile. Very little happens in the Republic without my knowledge. Please sit. You look troubled. Anakin remained standing, too agitated to sit. Master Windu thinks I should stay behind. He says I'm needed here to... What were his words? Maintain order, and report on the Senate's activities. They're using me as a spy. A representative, Palpatine corrected gently. Though I understand why you might see it differently. The Council has never fully trusted you, have they? Despite your power, your accomplishments, your loyalty. They see you as too passionate, too willing to question their rigid dogma. They're not wrong about the questioning, Anakin said bitterly. Every day I see the gap between what the Jedi claim to be and what we've actually become. We're supposed to be peacekeepers, but we lead armies. We're supposed to be above politics, but we take orders from the Senate. We're supposed to value all life, but we kill without hesitation when it serves the Republic's interests. The hypocrisy troubles you, Palpatine observed. As it should. You have a clarity of vision the Council lacks. They're blinded by their own traditions, unable to see that the galaxy has changed and their order must change with it. Anakin moved to the window, staring out at the endless cityscape. I met someone. Captain Rogers. He's from another universe entirely, brought here by some kind of dimensional accident. And he said something that's been eating at me. Oh? Palpatine's tone remained casual, but Anakin sensed his sudden intense interest. He said institutions that stop questioning themselves become corrupt. That the moment you prioritize your own authority over the people you're supposed to serve, you've already lost. Anakin turned back to face the Chancellor. He was talking about the Jedi, but it applies to the Republic too, doesn't it? How long has this war been going on? 3 years. 3 years of emergency powers. 3 years of expanded executive authority. When does it end, Chancellor? Palpatine rose slowly, moving to stand beside Anakin at the window. When the Separatists are defeated and peace is restored. You know that, Anakin. But what if the war is the point? Anakin asked. What if someone benefits from keeping it going? The emergency powers, the military contracts, the consolidation of control. What if peace would actually threaten whoever's orchestrating all of this? That's a dangerous line of thinking, Palpatine said carefully. It suggests a conspiracy at the highest levels of government. Doesn't it? Anakin met his gaze. The Jedi believe a Sith Lord is manipulating both sides, someone powerful enough to hide in plain sight, patient enough to play a long game, someone close to the center of power. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, Anakin thought he saw something shift in Palpatine's expression. Something cold and calculating that didn't match the warm mentor he'd known for years. But then it was gone, replaced by concerned affection. If such a person exists, Palpatine said, then they're more dangerous than anything the Republic has faced. The Jedi should be investigating thoroughly, are they? They investigate, Anakin said. But they're so focused on fighting the war that they're blind to what's happening around them. Or maybe they're afraid to look too closely. Maybe they're afraid of what they'll find. Palpatine placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder. You've always seen more clearly than your peers. It's what makes you special. Tell me, has this Captain Rogers influenced your thinking? The Council mentioned he challenged them quite directly. He said some things that made sense, Anakin admitted. Things about not suppressing emotions. About love being strength instead of weakness. About caring for people being the reason to fight, not a liability. Wise words, Palpatine agreed. The Jedi fear emotion because they fear losing control. But you and I know that passion, properly directed, is the source of true power. Not the weak meditative force the Jedi practice, but the raw, vital energy that comes from truly caring about something. Anakin felt a warning tingle, some instinct telling him they'd entered dangerous territory. But Palpatine's words resonated with everything he'd been feeling. Everything the Council had told him was wrong. The Jedi would call that the dark side, Anakin said carefully. The Jedi call anything they don't control the dark side, Palpatine countered. But what if the Force isn't divided into light and dark? What if it's simply power, and the moral quality comes from how you use it? The Jedi suppress passion and call it enlightenment. But what if true enlightenment comes from embracing the full spectrum of the Force? That sounds like Sith philosophy, Anakin said, but his voice lacked conviction. The Sith understood what the Jedi refused to accept, that the Force is power. And power is neither inherently good nor evil. It's a tool. Palpatine's voice grew more intense. Think about it, Anakin. You've had visions of your wife dying. The Jedi tell you to let go, to accept her death. But what if there were another way? What if the Force could be used to prevent death itself? Anakin's heart hammered. You mentioned that before. Ancient Sith techniques. More than techniques, Palpatine said. Knowledge. The ability to manipulate life and death through the Force. The Jedi discovered these abilities long ago, then suppressed them, locked them away. They were afraid of the power, afraid of what it might mean if Jedi could truly control life itself. Why are you telling me this? Anakin asked, though he already knew the answer. Because I've known about your nightmares for weeks, Palpatine said gently. I've seen how they torment you. And because I care about you, Anakin, I've watched you grow from a child into one of the galaxy's greatest warriors. I've seen your potential, your power, and I've seen the Jedi hold you back, telling you that your greatest strength, your capacity to love, is actually your greatest weakness. It is a weakness, Anakin said, but the words felt hollow. Attachment leads to jealousy, jealousy to fear. Fear of loss, Palpatine finished. But what if you didn't have to fear loss? What if you had the power to save the people you love from death itself? Anakin's breath caught. This was it. The moment he'd been both dreading and hoping for. The offer of power, of the ability to prevent Padmé's death. Everything he wanted, wrapped up in a promise from the one man who'd never failed him. But he heard Steve Rogers' voice in his memory. Power that comes from darkness always demands a price, and the price is usually your soul. What would it cost? Anakin asked quietly. This power, what would I have to give up? Palpatine turned back to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the transparent steel. The Jedi would tell you it costs everything. Your soul, your morality, your very identity. But I would say it only costs the illusions the Jedi have wrapped around your mind. The belief that emotion is weakness. The belief that attachment is wrong. The belief that caring deeply about someone is a path to evil. And if they're right, Anakin pressed, if using these abilities does corrupt me? If I save Padme but become something she can't love? Then you make that choice knowingly, Palpatine said. With full awareness of the cost. But isn't a choice better than helplessly watching the woman you love die? Isn't any price worth paying to save her? Anakin's hands clenched into fists. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings. Everything about this conversation felt wrong. Palpatine knew too much about Sith knowledge. He was offering forbidden power with the casual ease of someone who'd used it before. And beneath his grandfatherly concern, Anakin sensed something else, something calculating. But the desperate part of him, the part that woke screaming from nightmares of Padme's death, didn't care about warnings or suspicions. That part of him wanted the power Palpatine offered, regardless of the cost. I need time to think, Anakin said finally. Of course, Palpatine agreed smoothly. This isn't a decision to make lightly. But Anakin, know this. If you want to save your wife, the Jedi won't help you. They'll tell you to accept her death as the will of the Force. Only I can show you the path to the power you need. Why? Anakin asked suddenly. Why would you help me? What do you get out of this? Palpatine's expression softened into something that looked almost paternal. Because I've cared about you since you were a boy. Because I see in you the potential for greatness the Jedi try to suppress. And because the galaxy needs someone like you, Anakin. Someone powerful enough to end this war, restore order, bring true peace. The Jedi are too weak, too bound by their outdated code. But you could be something more. Something greater. Every instinct Anakin had developed as a warrior screamed that this was a trap. But his fear for Padme, his frustration with the Council, his desperate need to believe he could prevent the future he'd seen, all of it drowned out the warnings. I should go, Anakin said. The Council will be looking for me. Of course. But Anakin? Palpatine's voice stopped him at the door. When the time comes to choose between the Jedi's philosophy and Padme's life, remember, the Jedi would let her die to preserve their principles. I would help you save her, regardless of what anyone else thinks is right. Anakin left without responding, his mind churning. The corridors of the Senate building blurred around him as he walked, his feet carrying him without conscious direction. He ended up in one of the observation decks overlooking the cityscape, leaning against the railing, trying to sort through the chaos in his head. You look like a man at war with himself. Anakin spun to find Steve Rogers standing a few meters away, still wearing that strange, tactical suit under the borrowed cloak. How long have you been following me? I wasn't following you, Steve said. I came up here to think. Turns out I'm not the only one who does that. He moved to stand beside Anakin at the railing. You want to talk about it? There's nothing to talk about. That's not what your face says. Steve's voice was gentle but firm. Anakin, I've been a soldier long enough to recognize when someone's about to make a decision that'll haunt them. Whatever's going on, whatever choice you're facing, talk it through first. Anakin studied the man beside him. Steve Rogers had been in this galaxy for less than 2 days. Yet somehow he'd become the closest thing to a confidant Anakin had outside Padme. Maybe because he wasn't a Jedi, wasn't bound by the code's restrictions. Maybe because he'd said the things Anakin had been desperate to hear. Or maybe that was the problem. Maybe Steve was telling him what he wanted to hear, making it easier to justify the choice he was already inclined to make. Do you believe in destiny? Anakin asked. Steve considered the question. I believe we make choices that shape who we become. Some people call that destiny, but I think it's something we create ourselves. The Jedi believe I'm the chosen one, Anakin said. Prophesied to bring balance to the Force. When I was a child, they tested me and found I had more potential than anyone in their history. They said I was born of the Force itself, conceived without a father. Destined for greatness. That's a lot of pressure for one person, Steve observed. You have no idea, Anakin said bitterly. They expected me to be perfect, to follow the code flawlessly despite all that power. To be wise beyond my years. And when I wasn't, when I showed emotion, when I made mistakes, when I loved someone, they acted like I was failing my destiny. Maybe their idea of destiny is wrong, Steve suggested. Maybe being chosen doesn't mean being perfect. Maybe it means having the power to make important choices and the responsibility to make them well. And what if I make the wrong choice? Anakin asked. What if I choose to save someone I love, and that choice leads to terrible consequences? What if saving one person means failing the galaxy? Steve was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard experience. I had a choice once. I could follow orders, stay safe, let other people handle a dangerous mission. Or I could disobey orders, risk everything, go after men who'd been captured by the enemy. If I failed, I'd die. If I succeeded, but the mission went wrong, people I cared about might die anyway. But if I did nothing, those men would definitely die, and I'd have to live with that. What did you do? I went after them, Steve said. I broke every rule, defied direct orders, and walked into enemy territory with nothing but a shield and determination. And I saved them. But I could just as easily have gotten everyone killed, including myself. The choice was terrifying. But I made it because I couldn't live with doing nothing. So you're saying I should act? Anakin asked. That I should do whatever it takes to save Padme? No, Steve said firmly. I'm saying you should make the choice you can live with. But here's the thing, Anakin. I went into that mission knowing who I was and what I believed in. I wasn't trying to become something else or gain power I didn't have. I used what I had and trusted in doing the right thing. He turned to face Anakin fully. If you have to become someone you're not to save the person you love, you need to ask yourself, would they still love who you become? And would you? Anakin felt those words hit like physical blows. Because he'd been thinking exactly that. That he'd change, use forbidden power, embrace techniques the Jedi forbade. And he'd been telling himself it didn't matter, that saving Padme was worth any price. But would it be? If he saved her but became a monster, would she thank him? Or would she look at him with horror and revulsion? I'm afraid, Anakin admitted quietly. I'm afraid she'll die. I'm afraid I'll lose her like I lost my mother. And I'm afraid that my fear will drive me to do something unforgivable. Then don't do it, Steve said simply. Fear is natural, Anakin. Everyone feels it. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and still choosing to do what's right. Not what's easy, not what's convenient, not what promises the outcome you want. What's right. How do I know what's right? Anakin asked desperately. You already know, Steve said. Deep down you know. The question is whether you'll listen to that knowledge or let your fear override it. They stood in silence for a while, watching speeders stream through the Coruscant sky. Anakin felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on him. Palpatine's offer of power, the Council's demand for obedience, Padme's life hanging in the balance. And now Steve's words, challenging him to hold on to who he was instead of becoming someone new. The Chancellor offered me something, Anakin said finally. Knowledge, power, the ability to save Padme from death. He said the Jedi have suppressed this knowledge because they're afraid of it. That they'd rather let people die than accept that the Force can do more than their limited philosophy allows. Steve's expression grew very serious. What did you tell him? That I needed time to think. Good, Steve said, because that offer sounds like exactly the kind of devil's bargain I warned you about. Power that solves all your problems, but at a cost you don't understand until it's too late. You don't trust him, Anakin observed. I don't trust anyone who offers easy solutions to impossible problems, Steve said. In my experience, if something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And if this Chancellor has access to knowledge that the Jedi have locked away for centuries, you have to ask yourself, how does he know about it? Why does he have it? And what does he really want from you? Anakin had been asking himself the same questions, and he didn't like any of the answers. I should warn the Council, Anakin said. Tell them about what Palpatine said. Let them investigate. Will they believe you? Steve asked. Probably not, Anakin admitted. They'll say I'm being paranoid, that the Chancellor has been a loyal ally, that I'm looking for excuses to avoid accepting Padmé's potential death. Then we need proof, Steve said. Before we accuse anyone, especially someone as powerful as the Supreme Chancellor, we need evidence. Otherwise, we're just making things worse. How do we get proof? Steve smiled grimly. In my experience, when someone's hiding something, they eventually make a mistake. They get overconfident or impatient, or they underestimate someone. We watch, we wait, and we be ready to act when the moment comes. And in the meantime, Anakin asked. In the meantime, you hold on to who you are, Steve said. You don't let fear drive you toward darkness. You trust the people who actually care about you, not the ones offering you power, and you remember that sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. Anakin wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that there was a path through this nightmare that didn't involve compromising everything he believed in. But his visions of Padmé's death felt more real than any conversation, any philosophy, any promise. The fear was always there, lurking beneath every thought, every decision. And Palpatine's offer dangled before him like salvation, whispering that all he had to do was reach out and take it. He just had to be willing to pay the price, whatever that price might be. The Jedi Council chamber felt colder than usual when Anakin entered 2 days later. Master Windu stood at the center, his expression grave, while the holographic forms of distant council members flickered around the circle. Obi-Wan had just returned from his mission, successful from the tension in the room, but something else overshadowed that victory. Master Skywalker, Windu said formally. We have troubling news. General Grievous is dead. Master Kenobi struck him down on Utapau. The Separatist leadership is in disarray. That's good news, Anakin said cautiously. Isn't it? It should be, Obi-Wan said, his robe still dusty from battle. But I discovered something during the campaign. The Separatist Council has fled to Mustafar. They're waiting for someone to arrive, someone they referred to as their master, not Dooku. Someone else. The Sith Lord, Yoda said gravely. Finally, reveal himself he may. There's more, Windu continued. We've received intelligence that Chancellor Palpatine has refused to relinquish his emergency powers now that the Separatists are collapsing. He's claiming the Republic needs stability during the transition. Several senators are concerned he intends to make his authority permanent. Anakin's stomach twisted. He thought of his conversation with Palpatine. The offer of forbidden knowledge. The way the Chancellor had spoken about the Jedi's limitations. You think he's the Sith Lord? We're investigating, Windu said carefully. But we need to be certain before we act. Anakin, the Chancellor trusts you. Has he said or done anything that seemed unusual? Anything that might confirm our suspicions? This was it. The moment to tell them everything. About Palpatine's knowledge of Sith techniques, about his offer to teach Anakin how to prevent death, about the way he'd spoken of the Jedi with barely concealed contempt. But if Anakin told them, they'd move against Palpatine immediately. And if Palpatine truly knew how to save Padmé, that knowledge would be lost forever. The Jedi would never teach him those techniques. They'd rather let her die than break their precious code. Nothing specific, Anakin heard himself say. He's always been supportive of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan studied him with concern. Anakin, if there's something you're not telling us... There isn't, Anakin lied. The words felt like ash in his mouth, but he forced them out anyway. I'll keep my eyes open. If the Chancellor reveals anything, I'll report it immediately. Windu's expression suggested he didn't entirely believe that, but he nodded. The Council is convening a special session tomorrow. We'll decide how to proceed. Until then, maintain normal contact with the Chancellor. But be careful, Anakin. If he is the Sith Lord, he's been manipulating all of us for years. He's dangerous. I understand, Anakin said. He left the council chamber feeling like he was drowning. Every choice led deeper into darkness. Tell the Council the truth and lose any chance of saving Padme. Stay silent, and enable whatever Palpatine was planning. There was no good option, no clear path forward. His feet carried him toward Padme's apartment without conscious decision. She was his anchor, the one person who kept him sane when everything else fell apart. But when he arrived, he found Steve Rogers sitting in the main room, discussing something with Padme in low, urgent tones. They both looked up as he entered, and Anakin saw guilt flash across Padme's face. "Ani, I didn't expect you so soon." "What's going on?" Anakin asked, his gaze moving between them. Steve stood, his posture careful. "I came to talk to Padme about the political situation, about Palpatine. Anakin, we need to talk about what you told me, about the Chancellor's offer." "You told him?" Anakin turned to Padme, feeling betrayed. "I confided in you." "I didn't tell him anything," Padme said quickly. "Steve came to me with concerns about Palpatine's influence over you. We were trying to figure out how to help." "I don't need help," Anakin snapped. "I need people to trust me to make my own decisions." "Even when those decisions might destroy you?" Steve asked quietly. "Anakin, I've been thinking about what you said, about the Chancellor offering you power to prevent death. And I realize something. He's giving you exactly what you want to hear, exactly when you're most vulnerable. That's not mentorship. That's manipulation." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Steve interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "I understand you're terrified of losing Padme. I understand the Jedi Council has failed you. I understand you're looking for any way to save the person you love. But Anakin, this path leads nowhere good. If Palpatine is the Sith Lord, and all the evidence suggests he is, then everything he's told you has been a lie designed to turn you against the Jedi." "The Jedi have lied to me my entire life." Anakin's voice rose. "They told me I was the chosen one, but they treat me like a child. They preach compassion but forbid love. They claim to serve the Republic, but they're becoming the very thing they swore to destroy. Warriors who kill without question, following orders without conscience." "You're right," Steve said, and Anakin froze. "The Jedi Order has failed you. They've been rigid when they should have been understanding. They've demanded perfection when they should have offered support. But Anakin, the solution isn't to embrace the opposite extreme. It's not to trade the Jedi's cold detachment for the Sith's passionate destruction." Padme moved to Anakin's side, taking his hand. "Ani, I'm scared. Not of dying. I've accepted that risk as a senator. But I'm scared of what your fear is doing to you. I'm scared you're going to make a choice that you can't take back, all because you're trying to save me from something that might never happen." "The visions are real," Anakin said desperately. "I see you dying. I feel it. And I won't let that happen." "Even if preventing it means losing yourself?" Padme asked softly. "Even if it means becoming someone I don't recognize?" "Ani, I'd rather die as myself, knowing you stayed true to who you are, than live knowing you destroyed yourself to save me." Her words hit like physical blows, because deep down, Anakin knew she was right. If he embraced Palpatine's teachings, used the dark side to prevent her death, he might save her life but lose everything that made him the man she loved. But knowing that and accepting it were different things. "What do you want me to do?" Anakin asked, his voice breaking. "Just accept that you're going to die? Make peace with losing you?" "I want you to trust that we'll face whatever comes together," Padme said. "I want you to believe that love isn't about preventing every bad thing that might happen. It's about being together through whatever happens." "She's right," Steve added. "And there's something else you need to know. Obi-Wan told me the Council suspects Palpatine. They're investigating. If he is the Sith Lord, they're going to move against him soon." "Then I need to decide," Anakin said hollowly, "before that happens. Whether to stand with the Jedi or—" He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "Or with Palpatine," Steve finished. "But Anakin, if you choose him, you're not just choosing power. You're choosing to become what he is. A Sith. Someone who uses fear and hatred as weapons. Someone who'll do anything to achieve their goals, regardless of who gets hurt. I just want to save my wife, Anakin said quietly. I know, Steve said. But sometimes the price of saving someone is too high. Sometimes the cost is your soul. And once you've paid that price, there's no getting it back. Anakin looked between Steve and Padme, seeing the concern in their eyes, the genuine care. They were trying to save him from himself, but they didn't understand. They hadn't seen what he'd seen, felt what he'd felt. They didn't know what it was like to have power and still feel helpless. I need time alone, Anakin said finally. To think, to figure out what I'm going to do. Padme squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But please, Ani, don't let fear make this choice for you. Anakin nodded, though he wasn't sure he could promise that. Fear had been driving him for weeks now, maybe longer. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear that all his power meant nothing if he couldn't protect the people he loved. He left the apartment and walked through Coruscant's twilight streets, his hood raised, anonymous in the crowd. Somewhere above, the war was ending. The separatists were collapsing. Peace was finally within reach. But for Anakin Skywalker, the real war was just beginning. And it was a war he wasn't sure he could win. The Senate building's private office wing was nearly empty when Mace Windu arrived with 3 other Jedi Masters, Kit Fisto, Anakin Skywalker, and Saesee Tiin. Their investigation had finally borne fruit, evidence of Palpatine's connection to Sith teachings, financial ties to the Separatist Council, manipulations that stretched back years. The Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic was Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord who'd orchestrated the entire war. Steve Rogers followed at a distance, insisted upon by Obi-Wan despite Windu's protests. He exists outside the Force, Obi-Wan had argued. Palpatine won't sense him coming. He might be the advantage we need. Now, watching the 4 Jedi Masters stride toward Palpatine's office, Steve felt his tactical instincts screaming warnings. This felt wrong, too direct, too confident. If Palpatine had hidden his identity for decades, survived countless Jedi investigations, he wasn't going to surrender quietly. But before Steve could voice his concerns, the office doors opened and the Jedi entered. Steve positioned himself near the entrance, shield ready but concealed. Through the partially open door, he heard Windu's voice, hard and accusatory. Chancellor Palpatine, you're under arrest for treason against the Republic and for being the Sith Lord Darth Sidious. Palpatine's response was tinged with theatrical shock. The Jedi are taking over? This is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. You're the Sith Lord we've been searching for, Windu stated. And then everything exploded into violence. Steve saw it through the doorway, Palpatine moving with impossible speed, producing a crimson lightsaber from nowhere. The kindly Chancellor's face twisted into something ancient and evil as he struck. Anakin Skywalker fell first, then Saesee Tiin, their deaths so quick they barely had time to react. Kit Fisto lasted longer, his aquatic reflexes buying him precious seconds before Palpatine's blade found his heart. Then it was just Windu and Palpatine, their lightsabers clashing with thunderous cracks of energy. Palpatine was fast, impossibly fast, but Windu matched him, his purple blade a blur of controlled fury. They fought across the office, destroying furniture, shattering windows, their duel so intense that the air itself seemed to crackle with energy. Steve started forward, shield raised, but Obi-Wan's voice crackled through his comlink. Don't interfere. This is Jedi business. Windu can handle it. But Steve's instincts told him otherwise. He'd seen enough battles to recognize when someone was holding back, playing a longer game. Palpatine was skilled, but Windu was pressing him toward the shattered windows, toward defeat. It was happening too easily. This was a trap, not for Windu, for Anakin. Steve activated his comlink. Obi-Wan, where's Anakin? I don't know. He was supposed to wait at the temple, but... Obi-Wan's voice caught. No. Steve, if Anakin comes here, if he sees Palpatine in danger, he'll choose, Steve finished. We need to stop him. But it was already too late. Steve heard running footsteps and turned to see Anakin sprinting down the corridor, his face wild with conflict and fear. Their eyes met for a split second, and Steve saw the moment of decision written across the young Jedi's features. Anakin, don't! Steve shouted, moving to intercept. Anakin's hand shot out and Steve felt invisible force slam into him, throwing him against the wall with stunning power. His enhanced durability kept him conscious, but by the time he struggled to his feet, Anakin was already in the office. Steve staggered through the doorway to see the scene frozen in terrible tableau. Windu had Palpatine disarmed and trapped at the window's edge, his lightsaber at the Sith Lord's throat. Palpatine's face was a mask of defeat, but his eyes were fixed on Anakin with calculated intensity. "Anakin," Windu said sharply, "I told you to remain at the temple. You're going to kill him," Anakin said, his voice strained. "He's too dangerous to be left alive," Windu replied. "He controls the Senate, the courts. If we take him prisoner, he'll use the system to escape. This is the only way." "It's not the Jedi way," Anakin protested. "He should stand trial. He's a Sith Lord." Windu's patience was fraying. "He's too dangerous. Please," Palpatine gasped, his voice weak and pained. "Anakin, don't let them kill me. I'm too weak. Help me. You said you'd help me." Steve saw it happening in slow motion, saw the choice being made in Anakin's eyes, saw the fear and desperation overwhelming everything else. "Anakin, no!" Steve shouted, pushing off the wall, shield raised. But Anakin's lightsaber was already moving, the blue blade slashing through Windu's extended arm. The Jedi Master screamed as his hand, still gripping his lightsaber, fell away. And in that instant of shock, Palpatine moved. Lightning erupted from his fingertips. Not the exhausted Sith Lord pleading for mercy, but a being of pure malevolent power. The energy engulfed Windu, lifting him off his feet, throwing him through the shattered window. His scream echoed as he fell into the Coruscant abyss. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Anakin stood frozen, staring at his blade, at what he'd done. Palpatine straightened slowly, his face transforming from weak victim to triumphant predator. The kindly Chancellor was gone, replaced by something far older and more terrible. "Well done, young Skywalker," Palpatine, Sidious, said. "You've taken your first step into a larger world." "What have I done?" Anakin's voice was hollow with horror. "What you had to," Sidious replied. "The Jedi were going to kill me. You saved my life, and now I can save yours. I can teach you the power to save Padme." "You lied," Anakin said. "You're the Sith Lord. You orchestrated everything, the war, the deaths, all of it." "I created order from chaos," Sidious corrected. "And I can offer you what the Jedi never could, the power to protect those you love. But you must commit fully, Anakin. Half measures won't save Padme. You must embrace your destiny." Steve stepped forward, shield raised. "Anakin, it's not too late. You made a mistake, but you can still choose to do the right thing. Help me stop him." Sidious's yellow eyes fixed on Steve with sudden, intense focus. "Ah, the outsider, the one who exists beyond the Force. I sensed your arrival, but I couldn't perceive you directly. Fascinating and irrelevant." He raised his hand, lightning crackling between his fingers. Steve brought up his shield just as the torrent of energy struck. The vibranium absorbed most of it, but the force of the blast drove him backward, his boots skidding on the floor. The pain was intense, worse than anything Hydra's weapons had inflicted, but he held his ground. "Impressive," Sidious observed. "But you're outmatched, Captain Rogers. This is beyond your comprehension, beyond your power." "Maybe," Steve gritted out through the assault. "But I'm not going to stand by and watch you corrupt a good man." He angled the shield, redirecting the lightning back toward Sidious. The Sith Lord simply absorbed it, laughing. "You have spirit, but you lack understanding. The Force is absolute, and I am its master." The lightning intensified, overwhelming even vibranium's capacity to absorb energy. Steve felt his muscles seizing, felt the electricity cooking him from the inside. His enhanced healing was already working, but it wasn't enough. He was going to die here, in an office on an alien world, fighting a battle he didn't fully understand. But he'd faced death before, and he'd never backed down from a fight. "Anakin," Steve gasped. "Remember who you are. Remember Padme. Would she want this? Would she want you to become this? Anakin stood paralyzed between them, his face a mask of anguish. Steve could see the war raging behind his eyes. Duty versus fear, love versus power. The man he was versus the monster he might become. Choose, Sidious commanded. Help me destroy this interference, or watch your wife die. Those are your only options. No, Steve forced out. There's always another option. Always another choice. You just have to be brave enough to make it. The lightning cut off abruptly. Steve collapsed to one knee, smoke rising from his uniform. Every nerve screaming. But through his blurred vision, he saw Anakin raise his lightsaber. Toward Sidious. You lied to me, Anakin said, his voice shaking. You promised me power to save Padme, but all you've done is manipulate me into destroying everything I believe in. I won't be your weapon. Triumph flared in Steve's chest. Anakin was choosing. Against all odds, against all his fear, he was choosing to do the right thing. But Sidious merely smiled. You misunderstand, young Skywalker. I didn't lie. The power to save your wife is real, but you can only access it by fully embracing the dark side. And you've already begun that journey. His voice dropped, becoming hypnotic. You've killed Jedi. You've chosen power over principle. You've already fallen, Anakin. The only question now is whether you'll have the strength to see it through. Will you sacrifice everything to save Padme, or will you fail her like you failed your mother? Steve saw the words hit home, saw Anakin flinch as if physically struck. The mention of his mother, the wound that had never healed, was the perfect manipulation. That's not fair, Anakin whispered. Life isn't fair, Sidious countered. But power is real. The Jedi couldn't save your mother. They can't save Padme. But I can teach you. All you have to do is kneel. Don't listen to him, Steve said, forcing himself to stand. Anakin, this is the moment. This is where you decide who you're going to be. And I'm telling you, I've seen good men break under pressure. I've seen them make choices they can't take back. But I've also seen men find the courage to do the right thing even when it costs them everything. You can be that man. You can choose to walk away. And watch Padme die? Anakin asked, his voice breaking. If that's what it takes to stay who you are, Steve said. Yes. Because some prices are too high. Some costs destroy everything they're meant to protect. For a long moment, Anakin stood at the crossroads, poised between light and darkness, between the man he'd been and the monster he might become. Steve held his breath, his battered body tensed for action, ready to support whatever choice Anakin made. And then Anakin's shoulders slumped. His lightsaber lowered. He knelt before Darth Sidious. Teach me, Anakin whispered. Show me how to save her. Steve's heart shattered. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Sidious's triumphant laughter filled the office, echoing across Coruscant like the death knell of hope itself. Steve lunged forward, shield raised, but Sidious's lightning caught him mid-stride. The Sith Lord's power had grown. Or perhaps he'd simply stopped holding back. The energy didn't just hurt. It felt like being unmade at a molecular level, torn apart and reconstructed in agony. Stay down, Captain, Sidious commanded. Your courage is admirable but futile. This moment has been decades in the making. You cannot stop what has already been set in motion. Through the pain, Steve saw Anakin kneeling, his head bowed. But something was wrong. The young Jedi's hands were clenched too tight, his shoulders too tense. This wasn't submission. This was preparation. Rise, Darth Vader, Sidious intoned, his voice carrying ritual weight. You are now a Lord of the Sith, and your first act will be... Anakin's lightsaber ignited in an upward arc, aimed directly at Sidious's heart. The Sith Lord twisted impossibly fast, the blade missing by centimeters. The lightning died as Sidious refocused his attention, and Steve collapsed, gasping. Treachery! Sidious's voice was pure rage. You dare? I dare, Anakin said, his voice steady now. Because Captain Rogers is right. Some prices are too high, and I won't become a monster to save the woman I love. She wouldn't want me to, and I won't dishonor her by doing it anyway. Pride surged through Steve's chest even as he struggled to his feet. Anakin had chosen. In the critical moment, facing his greatest fear, he'd chosen to be a good man rather than a powerful one. But Sidious was far from defeated. "Foolish boy," the Sith Lord hissed. "You think you can resist? You've already fallen. You killed Windu. You've taken Jedi lives. There's no redemption for you now." "Maybe not," Anakin said, and Steve heard the pain in his voice. "Maybe I have fallen. But that doesn't mean I have to keep falling. That doesn't mean I can't try to climb back up." He attacked, his lightsaber a blur of blue energy. Sidious met him with his own blade, and the office exploded into chaos once more. But this time, the fight was different. Anakin wasn't holding back, wasn't conflicted. He was fighting with everything he had, channeling his anger and fear not into the dark side, but into protecting what mattered. Steve circled around, looking for an opening. His body was healing, the super soldier serum working overtime, but he was still weakened from the lightning, and he had no illusions about his ability to fight a Sith Lord directly. But he could be a distraction. He could be the advantage Anakin needed. He waited for his moment. When Sidious's back was turned, focused entirely on Anakin's assault, Steve charged. His shield struck the Sith Lord between the shoulder blades with all of his enhanced strength behind it. Sidious staggered forward, and Anakin's lightsaber found its mark, not a killing blow, but a strike that sent the Sith Lord's weapon flying from his grip. For a heartbeat, they had him. But Sidious was not done. Lightning erupted from his hands in all directions, a storm of dark side energy that filled the office. Steve brought up his shield, protecting himself from the worst of it. Anakin deflected what he could with his lightsaber, but the sheer volume of power overwhelmed them both. They were driven backward, toward the shattered windows, toward the fatal drop beyond. "You cannot defeat me," Sidious screamed. "I am the dark side incarnate. I have planned this for decades. I have orchestrated the fall of the Republic, the destruction of the Jedi Order. You are nothing, nothing." The lightning intensified, and Steve felt his shield arm going numb. Beside him, Anakin was being driven to his knees, his lightsaber flickering as he struggled to maintain his defense. They were losing. Even together, even with Anakin's power and Steve's determination, they were being overwhelmed. And then a voice cut through the chaos. "But you did not plan for all of us." Obi-Wan Kenobi emerged from the doorway, his lightsaber ignited, his expression harder than Steve had ever seen it. Behind him came a dozen more Jedi, temple guards and masters who'd been investigating Sidious's private records, who'd uncovered the final proof of his treachery. Sidious's lightning faltered for just a moment as he reassessed the situation. Too many Jedi, too many witnesses. His perfect manipulation had unraveled at the critical moment. He made a choice. "You've won nothing, Jedi," Sidious snarled. "Order 66. Execute Order 66. The command went out over every clone trooper's communication system, a protocol buried so deep in their programming that they couldn't resist it. Across the galaxy, clone soldiers turned on their Jedi generals, opening fire without hesitation or remorse. The Jedi Order's greatest army became its executioner in a single instant. But here, in Palpatine's office, that order couldn't help him. Obi-Wan's blade came down, and Sidious threw up a force barrier. Other Jedi spread out, surrounding him, cutting off escape routes. The Sith Lord was powerful, perhaps the most powerful Force user alive, but even he couldn't fight a dozen Jedi Masters simultaneously. "Anakin," Sidious said, his voice suddenly desperate. "Help me. I'm the only one who can save Padme. Kill these Jedi, and I'll teach you." "No," Anakin said firmly. "I'm done listening to your lies." He attacked again, and this time the other Jedi joined him. Steve stayed back, his shield ready to intercept any lightning, but focusing on protecting the Jedi from Sidious's more desperate attacks. The Sith Lord fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, lightning and telekinetic force radiating in all directions. Two more Jedi fell before Obi-Wan's blade finally found its mark, cutting through Sidious's defenses. The Sith Lord collapsed, his body smoking, his face a mask of hatred and defeat. But even dying, he smiled. "You've doomed yourselves," he rasped. Order 66 cannot be stopped. The Jedi will fall, and the Empire will rise. Not if we stop it first, Obi-Wan said coldly. He raised his lightsaber for the killing blow. Wait, Anakin said suddenly. Don't kill him, not yet. He might know how to save the Jedi who are being attacked right now. How to countermand the order. Obi-Wan hesitated, and in that hesitation, Sidious struck. Not with lightning or a blade, but with pure dark side energy. A wave of hatred and corruption that slammed into everyone in the room. Steve felt it even without Force sensitivity, felt the malevolence trying to tear apart his mind. But it was Anakin who bore the brunt of it. The Sith Lord poured everything he had into one final attempt to break the young Jedi. To push him over the edge into darkness. "You've failed," Sidious screamed. "Your mother died because you were weak. Padme will die because you chose the Jedi. Everything you love will turn to ash, and it will be your fault. Your fault. Your fault." Steve saw Anakin stagger, saw the words cutting into him like knives, but he also saw something else. Determination. Pain. Yes. Guilt. Certainly. But also resolve. "Maybe," Anakin said through gritted teeth. "Maybe I will lose everything. Maybe Padme will die despite everything I do. But I'll face that as myself. Not as your puppet. Not as Darth Vader. As Anakin Skywalker. A flawed man trying to do the right thing." He turned to Obi-Wan. "Do it. End this. Before he hurts anyone else." Obi-Wan's lightsaber fell. Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith, orchestrator of the Clone Wars, died with a final curse on his lips. The oppressive weight of his presence lifted from the room, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then chaos erupted. Comlinks blazed with emergency signals. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Jedi under attack, clone troopers turning traitor, Order 66 spreading like a plague. The carefully orchestrated fall of the Jedi Order was underway, and even with Sidious dead, the momentum couldn't be stopped. "We need to warn everyone," Obi-Wan said urgently. "Get to the temple. Send out the recall signal. Tell the surviving Jedi to go into hiding." "What about the Republic?" one of the Jedi Masters asked. "Without a Chancellor?" "The Senate can sort that out," Obi-Wan said harshly. "Our priority is survival. Steve, get Anakin out of here. Get him to Padme. Keep them both safe." "What about you?" Steve asked. "I'm going to do what I can to save our people." Obi-Wan's expression was grim. "This isn't over. Sidious may be dead, but his plan is still in motion. We need to contain it before the entire order is destroyed." Steve nodded, grabbing Anakin's arm. The young Jedi was in shock, staring at Sidious's corpse, at the enormity of what had almost happened. "Come on," Steve said gently. "Padme needs to know you're alive, and we need to figure out what comes next." They fled the Senate building as Republic security forces converged, as news of the Chancellor's death spread across Coruscant, as the galaxy teetered on the edge of chaos. Steve guided Anakin through back corridors and service passages, using every evasion tactic he'd learned during the war. When they finally reached Padme's apartment, she ran to Anakin, pulling him into a desperate embrace. "I felt something," she said. "Through our bond. Something terrible almost happened." "It did," Anakin said, his voice hollow. "I almost became exactly what Sidious wanted. I almost chose power over everything else. And Steve?" He turned to look at Steve. "Steve stopped me. By refusing to give up. By believing I could be better than my worst impulses." "We stopped him together," Steve corrected. "You made the choice, Anakin. You chose to be a good man, even when it was the hardest thing in the world." "But at what cost?" Anakin asked. "The Jedi Order is being destroyed. The Republic is in chaos. And Padme." He looked at his wife. "The visions haven't stopped. I can still see you dying. And now I've lost the one person who claimed he could prevent it." "Then we'll face it together," Padme said firmly. "Whatever happens, Ani, we face it together. Not as a Sith and his victim. Not as a desperate man and his obsession. As husband and wife. As partners." Steve watched them hold each other, and felt a bittersweet ache in his chest. He thought of Peggy, of the life he'd left behind, of the future he'd never have. But here, in this moment, he'd done something that mattered. He'd helped save a good man from darkness. He'd helped prevent the rise of an empire that would have enslaved a galaxy. It wasn't everything. The Jedi Order was still being hunted, the Republic was still in crisis, and Padmé's fate was still uncertain. But it was something, and sometimes, something was enough. "What happens now?" Anakin asked, looking to Steve for guidance. Steve thought of every impossible situation he'd faced, every battle where victory seemed unreachable. And he thought of the one truth that had carried him through all of it. "Now," he said, "we fight to protect what matters. We don't give up. We don't surrender. And we prove that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs us everything, is always worth it." Anakin nodded slowly. "Then I guess we better get to work." Outside, Coruscant burned with uncertainty. The Clone Wars were ending, but something new was beginning. A fight for the soul of the Republic. A struggle to save what remained of the Jedi. A battle to protect democracy from the ashes of Sidious's scheme. And in a quiet apartment overlooking the chaos, 3 people. A Jedi who'd chosen redemption. A senator who refused to surrender hope, and a soldier from another reality who'd never learned to quit, began planning how to save a galaxy from the darkness. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, there was a chance it could be won. The Jedi Temple burned. Steve stood on Padmé's balcony, watching smoke rise from the ancient structure as clone troopers stormed its halls. Even from kilometers away, he could hear the sounds of battle. Blaster fire, screams, the distinctive hum of lightsabers clashing against overwhelming numbers. Order 66 had reached Coruscant, and the clones were executing their programming with mechanical efficiency. "We have to do something," Anakin said, standing beside him. The young Jedi's hands gripped the railing so tight the metal groaned. "Those are younglings in there, children who can't defend themselves." "Obi-Wan and the Council are evacuating who they can," Steve said. "They sent out the recall signal. Jedi across the galaxy are going into hiding." "It's not enough," Anakin said desperately. "Sidious's plan is still working even with him dead. The clones can't stop themselves. They're programmed to kill Jedi on sight. We're watching the systematic execution of an entire order." Steve had seen genocide before. He'd liberated concentration camps, seen the evidence of Hydra's atrocities, but watching it happen in real time, unable to stop it, brought back every nightmare he'd tried to forget. "Then we save who we can," Steve said firmly. "We can't save everyone, Anakin, but we can make a difference. That has to be enough." A comlink chirped. Anakin answered it immediately, and Obi-Wan's voice came through, strained and exhausted. "Anakin, thank the Force. I'm at the temple with survivors, about 40 Jedi, mostly younglings and their guardians. But we're trapped in the council chambers. The clones have the entire building surrounded." "How many clones?" Steve asked. "At least a battalion," Obi-Wan replied. "Maybe more. They're being coordinated by someone who knows Jedi tactics. They're cutting off escape routes, jamming our communications, using anti-force weapons." A pause. "Steve, I don't think we can fight our way out. There are too many, and we have children to protect." Steve's tactical mind was already working. A battalion of trained soldiers against 40 people. Most of them non-combatants, surrounded, trapped, outgunned. The kind of situation that had no good answers, only degrees of terrible. "We need a distraction," Steve said. "Something big enough to pull their attention away from the temple. Give you time to evacuate." "What kind of distraction?" Obi-Wan asked. Steve looked at Anakin. Saw the same desperate determination in the young Jedi's eyes. "The kind that makes the clones think there's a bigger threat than you. Anakin and I will hit their command structure. Take out their coordination. Force them to redirect resources to deal with us." "That's suicide," Obi-Wan said flatly. "You'll be throwing yourselves against an entire army." "Yeah," Steve agreed. "But it'll give you a chance. And that's better than sitting here watching them die." Anakin was already moving, gathering his lightsaber, checking his equipment. "Where's their command center?" Former Republic military staging area, 3 kilometers from the temple, Obi-Wan said reluctantly. But Anakin, Steve, this is madness. Even you two can't take on that many soldiers. We don't have to beat them, Steve said. We just have to be loud enough that they can't ignore us. Obi-Wan, give us 30 minutes. That enough time to evacuate? If we move fast, yes, but then that's what we'll do, Steve interrupted. May the Force be with you, Obi-Wan. He ended the transmission before the Jedi Master could argue further. Padme emerged from the apartment, her face pale but composed. You're going to fight an army. We're going to give people a chance to escape, Steve corrected. He moved to her, taking her hands. Padme, if this goes wrong, if Anakin and I don't come back, the Republic is going to need leaders like you. People who remember what it was supposed to stand for. Don't, she said, her voice breaking. Don't say goodbye. Not after everything we've been through. Not when we just got Ani back. Anakin pulled her into his arms, pressing his forehead against hers. I have to do this. Those children, they're innocent. They didn't choose to be Jedi, didn't choose to be hunted. If I can save them, I have to try. Even if it costs you your life? Padme asked. Especially then, Anakin said quietly. Because that's what being a Jedi is supposed to mean. Not following orders blindly, not suppressing emotions, but being willing to sacrifice yourself to protect others. Steve taught me that. Steve felt the weight of those words. He'd come to this galaxy by accident, a soldier displaced from his own war. But somehow, in trying to save one man from darkness, he'd found a purpose. Maybe the Force had brought him here. Maybe it was just random chance. Either way, he was going to see it through. We need weapons, Steve said. The clones have blasters, armor, superior numbers. We need to even the odds. Padme has security equipment, Anakin said. Detonators, EMP devices, things her guards use. And I know where the Republic's armory is. We can get heavy weapons. They moved quickly, gathering everything they could carry. Steve strapped his shield to his back, added a borrowed blaster to his belt, loaded his pockets with thermal detonators. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it would have to do. As they prepared to leave, Padme caught Steve's arm. Bring him back, she said intensely. Whatever it takes, bring Anakin back to me. That's the plan, Steve said. But Padme, if I don't, if things go wrong, tell him something for me. Tell him that choosing to be a good man, even when it's hard, is the bravest thing anyone can do. And I was proud to fight beside him. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Then they were gone, racing through Coruscant's streets as sirens wailed and military craft filled the skies. The command center was exactly where Obi-Wan had said, a fortified complex swarming with clone troopers. Steve and Anakin watched from a rooftop across the plaza, counting soldiers, mapping defenses, looking for weaknesses. There, Anakin said, pointing to a communications array. That's how they're coordinating the attack on the temple. Take it out and they'll lose their tactical advantage. Surrounded by about 50 soldiers, Steve observed. With more in the buildings around it. We'll be in a kill box the moment they spot us. Then we move fast and hit hard, Anakin said. I'll handle the close combat. You provide covering fire and watch my back. Just like old times. We've known each other 3 days, Steve said. Feels longer, Anakin replied with a grim smile. Ready? Steve pulled his shield from his back, checked his blaster one last time. He thought of Bucky, of the Howling Commandos, of every desperate mission where the odds were impossible and success unlikely. He'd never backed down before, wasn't about to start now. Let's go save some kids, he said. They dropped from the rooftop together, Anakin using the Force to cushion their fall, Steve hitting the ground in a roll that brought him up running. The clones spotted them immediately, weapons tracking. But Anakin's lightsaber was already deflecting blaster bolts. The blue blade moved in impossible patterns, protecting them both as they charged toward the communications array. Steve threw his shield, the vibranium disc ricocheting off helmets and weapons, stunning and disarming clones in its path. It returned to his hand as he'd trained it to do thousands of times, and he immediately hurled it again, taking out a cluster of soldiers near a barricade. Anakin reached the array first, his lightsaber carving through support struts and power conduits. The massive structure groaned and collapsed, taking out the coordination systems and several squads of clones in the process. Alarms blared across the complex as the command network went dark. Phase 1 complete, Anakin said, breathing hard. Now comes the hard part. The hard part was surviving. Clone troopers poured from every building, converging on their position with military precision. Steve and Anakin fought back to back, shield and lightsaber working in concert. Steve had fought beside super soldiers, alien warriors, gods, but he'd never fought beside someone who could literally predict enemy movements through mystical foresight, while simultaneously deflecting blaster fire with a plasma sword. It was terrifyingly effective. But they were still outnumbered 100-1. "We need to fall back," Steve shouted, throwing a thermal detonator that cleared a path through the advancing soldiers. "Create distance. Regroup." "There." Anakin pointed to a fortified building on the plaza's edge. "Defensive position. We can bottleneck them." They ran, Steve's enhanced speed keeping pace with Anakin's force-augmented sprint. Blaster bolts scorched the air around them, some deflected by Anakin's blade, others absorbed by Steve's shield. They crashed through the building's entrance and immediately began barricading it with overturned furniture and equipment. "How long do you think we can hold?" Anakin asked, taking up position at a window. "Long enough," Steve said. "Obi-Wan said 30 minutes. We've used 10. Just need to keep their attention for 20 more. 20 minutes. An eternity when hundreds of soldiers were trying to kill you." But Steve had held positions before, had made last stands against impossible odds. The difference was he'd usually had a team, had backup, had reinforcements coming. Here, there was just him and Anakin, 2 men against an army, buying time with their lives. The clones attacked in waves, coordinated and relentless. Steve's shield rang like a bell as blaster fire hammered it. Anakin's lightsaber wove patterns of light, deflecting, redirecting, occasionally lashing out to disable weapons or cut through walls that provided enemy cover. They fought in perfect synchronization, 2 warriors from different worlds united by shared purpose. Steve's comlink buzzed, Obi-Wan's voice, strained but alive. "We're moving. 10 minutes to get everyone clear. Can you hold?" "We'll hold," Steve promised, ducking as a rocket destroyed the wall above them. "Just get those kids out." More clones poured in. Steve's ammunition was running low, his shield arm going numb from constant impacts. Beside him, Anakin was beginning to slow, his movements less precise, fatigue showing through even his force-enhanced endurance. They couldn't maintain this much longer. A massive explosion rocked the building, and part of the ceiling collapsed. Steve threw himself over Anakin, his shield taking the brunt of the debris. When the dust cleared, they were trapped in a partially collapsed room, enemies closing in from all sides. "This is it," Anakin said quietly. "There's no way out." Steve looked at the young Jedi, battered, exhausted, but still standing, still fighting. He thought about everything that had led to this moment. The Tesseract, the dimensional rift, meeting Anakin at his lowest point and refusing to let him fall into darkness, fighting beside him to stop Sidious, and now making a last stand to save innocent lives. It was a good way to go out. "You know," Steve said, "where I come from, we had a saying. Captain America doesn't give up. He fights until he can't fight anymore, and then he fights some more." "Is that your name?" Anakin asked. "Captain America?" "Something like that," Steve said. "The point is, we're not done yet. Not while we're still breathing. Not while there are people counting on us." Anakin's exhausted expression shifted into something like determination. "You're right. We're not done. Not by a long shot." He closed his eyes, centering himself in the Force. Steve felt the air pressure change, felt reality bend around the young Jedi as he drew on power he'd been holding in reserve. When Anakin's eyes opened, they blazed with intensity. "Follow my lead," Anakin said, "and stay close." He raised his hands, and the Force exploded outward. Debris lifted into the air, forming a whirlwind of metal and stone. Clone troopers were thrown backward, their formations shattered. Anakin moved through the chaos like a storm, his lightsaber an extension of his will. His power focused not on destruction, but on creating a path. Steve followed, shield raised, protecting Anakin's blind spots. They fought their way through the building, through the plaza, leaving devastation in their wake. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't efficient. But it was effective. And it gave Obi-Wan the time he needed. Steve's comlink crackled one last time. "We're clear. All survivors evacuated. Steve, Anakin, get out of there. You've done enough." "Copy that," Steve said. He grabbed Anakin's arm. "Time to go." They ran, the clones regrouping behind them, pursuit inevitable. But Padme's speeder was waiting where they'd hidden it, and Anakin's force-enhanced piloting got them airborne before the soldiers could cut them off. They flew low and fast, weaving through traffic, evading pursuit. Until finally the military complex disappeared behind Coruscant's endless towers. They landed at a safe house Padme had provided, one of many hidden locations the late Chancellor had never discovered. Inside they collapsed, adrenaline fading, injuries making themselves known. Steve's entire body was one massive bruise. Anakin had burns from near-miss blaster shots and was bleeding from a dozen cuts, but they were alive. And more importantly, the Jedi younglings were alive. "We did it," Anakin said wonderingly. "We actually did it." "We did," Steve agreed. Then he smiled despite the pain. "Not bad for 3 days' work." Anakin laughed. Actually laughed, the sound startling in its genuineness. "You know what's crazy? 3 days ago, I was on the edge of falling to the dark side. I was going to become a Sith Lord. I was going to help Palpatine destroy everything I'd sworn to protect. And then you showed up, this impossible man from another universe, and you wouldn't let me fall." "You didn't fall because you chose not to," Steve corrected. "I just reminded you who you were." "No," Anakin said seriously. "You showed me who I could be. You showed me that caring about people, loving them, wasn't a weakness. That doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, was what being a hero meant. The Jedi taught me to suppress my emotions. You taught me to use them without being consumed by them." Steve thought about Dr. Erskine's words, about staying a good man rather than becoming a perfect soldier. "We all need someone to believe in us," he said. "I was lucky enough to have people who believed in me when I was nothing. Figured I'd pay that forward." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Two warriors from different worlds who'd found unexpected friendship in shared struggle. Outside, Coruscant churned with uncertainty. The Republic was in chaos, the Jedi scattered, Sidious's plans still reverberating even after his death. But they'd saved something. Protected something worth protecting. And sometimes, that was all anyone could do. The door opened, and Padme rushed in, medical supplies in hand. She went straight to Anakin, examining his injuries with practiced efficiency. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm alive," Anakin replied, pulling her close. "We're both alive, and we saved 40 Jedi lives. That's worth a few cuts and bruises." Steve stood, giving them privacy. He moved to the window, looking out at the city he'd come to know over 3 impossible days. Somewhere out there, Obi-Wan was coordinating the Jedi's survival. Somewhere, senators were deciding the Republic's future. Somewhere, the galaxy was changing in ways no one could predict. And somewhere, in a universe far away, his friends were still fighting Hydra without him. He touched the scorched fabric of his uniform, felt the weight of his shield. He'd been torn from his world, thrown into a conflict he didn't understand, forced to make impossible choices. But he'd also made a difference. He'd helped save a good man from darkness. He'd helped protect innocent lives. He'd proven that sometimes all it took was one person refusing to give up. Maybe that was why he'd been brought here. Maybe the Force, or fate, or random chance had needed someone who couldn't be sensed or predicted. Someone who existed outside the grand design. Someone who would fight not because destiny demanded it, but because it was the right thing to do. Or maybe he was just a soldier doing his job, and the rest was trying to find meaning in chaos. Either way, the fight wasn't over, and Captain America never surrendered. 3 weeks later, Steve stood in the newly established Jedi Sanctuary on Alderaan, watching younglings practice lightsaber forms under Obi-Wan's careful instruction. The Order had been decimated, hundreds of Jedi killed in the initial purge. But survivors were trickling in, guided by Obi-Wan's recall signal. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. "You're thinking about home," Padme said, joining him at the window. Her pregnancy was showing now, a visible reminder of the life that continued despite everything. "Always," Steve admitted. "My team, my world, the war I left unfinished." "The Republic owes you a debt," Padme said. "Without you, Anakin would have fallen. Sidious would have completed his plan. The Jedi would be extinct." "I just did what anyone would do," Steve said. "No," Padme replied firmly. "You did what only you could do. You saw a good man being manipulated, and you refused to let him fall. That took courage, and belief in people when everyone else had given up on them." Anakin emerged from the training hall, his robe still bearing scorch marks from the temple battle. The council had debated his fate for days. He'd struck down Mace Windu, had nearly turned to the dark side. Some argued for expulsion, but Obi-Wan had defended him, and ultimately, the council recognized that Anakin had made the hardest choice at the critical moment. He'd chosen redemption over power. That counted for something. "The Senate voted," Anakin said. "Bail Organa is the new Chancellor. He's committed to investigating Sidious's network, dismantling the emergency powers, restoring democracy." He paused. "It won't be easy. The Republic is fractured. But there's hope." "Hope is what we fought for," Steve said. "The rest is just details." Obi-Wan approached, his expression thoughtful. "Captain Rogers, the Council has been researching your arrival. The dimensional rift, the energy signature. Master Yoda believes the Force brought you here for a purpose, to save Anakin at his moment of greatest need. But that purpose is fulfilled now." Steve's heart skipped. "You found a way back?" "Perhaps," Obi-Wan said carefully. "The Jedi archives contain records of ancient Force nexuses, places where the barrier between realities is thin. If we can generate enough energy, similar to your Tesseract, we might be able to tear open a path home." "Might," Steve repeated. "There are no guarantees," Obi-Wan admitted. "The attempt could fail, or it could tear you apart. But it's a chance. The only one we can offer." Steve looked at Anakin, at Padme, at the sanctuary they'd built from chaos. He'd found something here. Purpose, friendship, a fight worth winning. But his world needed him too. Bucky needed him. Peggy needed him. The war against Hydra wasn't finished. "When?" Steve asked. 3 days, Obi-Wan said. "We need to prepare the Nexus, gather the necessary Force users. Master Yoda will lead the ritual." 3 days. Steve spent them saying goodbye to a galaxy he'd barely known but had come to care about deeply. He trained with Anakin, sharing techniques from his world while learning more about the Force. He spoke with Padme about democracy, about holding on to ideals when the world tried to corrupt them. He walked Coruscant streets one last time, memorizing the alien beauty of a city among the stars. On the 3rd day, they gathered at the Force Nexus, a chamber beneath the sanctuary where reality felt thin and malleable. Yoda stood at its center, surrounded by a circle of Jedi Masters. Anakin and Obi-Wan flanked Steve, their presence a silent support. "Ready are you?" Yoda asked. Steve gripped his shield, the familiar weight comforting. "Ready." "Remember, Captain Rogers," Obi-Wan said. "What you did here mattered. You saved more than one man. You saved the ideals that man represented. And you showed me that being a Jedi isn't about following rules," Anakin added. "It's about fighting for what's right, even when the cost is high. I won't forget that." Steve clasped Anakin's hand. "Stay strong. Be the Jedi the Order needs, and take care of your family." "I will," Anakin promised. "May the Force be with you, Steve Rogers." "And with you," Steve replied. Yoda raised his hands, and the other Jedi followed suit. Energy built in the chamber, not just power, but purpose. The Force coalesced, bending reality, searching for the path Steve had traveled. The air shimmered, cracked, and a familiar blue light began to bleed through. The Tesseract's energy. The way home. "Go now," Yoda urged. "Before the portal closes." Steve stepped toward the rift, feeling it pull at him like a current. He turned back one last time, seeing Anakin standing tall and proud, Obi-Wan's hand on his former apprentice's shoulder, Padme watching from the doorway with hope in her eyes. He'd saved them. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. And sometimes, enough was everything. Steve Rogers stepped into the light and felt reality tear around him. The sensation was agony and euphoria, death and rebirth. He saw galaxies spin past, felt the Force guiding him across dimensional barriers, carrying him home. And then he was falling through Earth's sky, the Hydra facility visible below, the Tesseract's explosion still echoing across space-time. He crashed through the facility's roof, landing in a crouch, shield raised, exactly 3 seconds after he'd left. Bucky stared at him in shock. "Steve? You were just—" "I know," Steve said, grinning despite everything. "I'll explain later. Right now, we have a base to secure." They fought together, the Howling Commandos rallying around their returned captain. The battle was hard but familiar, and this time, Steve fought with new perspective. He'd seen a galaxy at war, had stood against a Sith Lord, had saved a hero from darkness. This fight seemed almost simple by comparison. When it was over, when Hydra's forces were defeated and the Tesseract secured, Peggy found him standing alone in the ruined facility. "You look different," she observed. "Like you've seen something that changed you." "Maybe I have," Steve said. He thought of Anakin's choice, of standing at the precipice and choosing light over darkness. "But I'm still me. Still the kid from Brooklyn who can't stand bullies." "Good," Peggy said, smiling. "We're going to need that kid. The war's not over yet." Steve looked at the Tesseract, its blue glow dimmed but still present. Somewhere across dimensional barriers, a galaxy was healing. A young Jedi was becoming the hero he was meant to be. And a Republic was learning to be worthy of the people it served. He'd never see them again. But he'd carry them with him. The lesson that sometimes saving one person was the same as saving a galaxy. "No," Steve agreed. "The war's not over. But we're going to win it. Because that's what we do. We fight for what's right no matter the odds. And we never, ever give up." Behind him, the Tesseract pulsed once. A farewell from the Force that had guided him. And then went dark. Captain America was home. But the man who returned was stronger, wiser, and more determined than the one who'd left. And in a galaxy far, far away, Anakin Skywalker stood on Alderaan's balcony, holding his newborn twins, Luke and Leia, and smiled. The Force had brought them a guardian when they needed one most. And that guardian had shown them that the greatest power wasn't in the Force, or in lightsabers, or in ancient prophecies. It was in choosing, every single day, to be a good person. Even when the galaxy tried to make you something else. Captain Steve Rogers returned to his world changed by a galaxy far, far away. He'd arrived as a soldier seeking purpose, and left as something more. A man who'd seen the full cost of failing to believe in people, and the incredible power of refusing to give up on them. In the Star Wars galaxy, Anakin Skywalker lived a life Palpatine had never intended. He raised his children with Padme, teaching them that the Force was a tool, but character was a choice. He helped rebuild the Jedi Order into something better, an organization that valued compassion as much as discipline, that recognized love as strength rather than weakness. The scars of Order 66 never fully healed, but the survivors carried forward the lessons Steve Rogers had taught them, that doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, was the truest expression of heroism. The Republic stumbled forward, imperfect but alive. Democracy survived because people like Bail Organa and Padme Amidala fought for it, inspired by a man from another universe who'd shown them that principles mattered more than power. And sometimes, late at night, Anakin would tell his children about the soldier with the shield who'd appeared when darkness seemed inevitable, who'd fought beside him, who'd believed in him when no one else would. "Did you ever see him again?" young Luke would ask. "No," Anakin would reply. "But I didn't need to. He showed me who I could be. The rest was up to me." Across dimensional barriers, separated by impossible distance, two heroes carried the same truth forward. That the measure of a person wasn't their power, but what they chose to do with it. That falling was human. But choosing to stand back up was heroic. That sometimes all it took to save a galaxy was one person refusing to let a good man fall into darkness. The Force had brought them together for a reason, and that reason had changed everything. May the Force be with you. More stories await.